Is it possible that everything you've been taught about the origin of civilization isn't the truth? Tonight, let me tell you a story that might change the way you see the past, the present, and yourself. If you're still listening, please leave a comment with your time zone or location, so I know you're here with me. And if you want to journey with us every night through mysterious historical travels, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, close your eyes, relax your shoulders, and let your mind drift with my voice. We're about to step into a journey where time no longer has meaning, and the boundary between past and present slowly fades away. Imagine you're standing in the middle of the Mesopotamian desert, where, according to textbooks, human civilization began. The night wind blows gently across your skin, carrying the scent of dry sand and moisture from the distant Euphrates River. Above your head, the star-filled sky sparkles like diamonds scattered across black velvet. You hear the sound of sand softly falling, grain by grain, as if time itself is flowing backward. Before you, the ruins of Sumer emerge in the darkness. Ancient stone walls, tablets inscribed with humanity's first cuneiform writing, temples dedicated to gods that ancient people once worshipped. You step closer, one step at a time, and reach out to touch the cold stone wall. Beneath the thick layer of 6,000 years of dust, you sense something much more ancient, much deeper, as if this wall is whispering to you a secret that history has never told. But was Sumer truly the beginning? Or perhaps we've missed the most important chapter, a chapter that's been erased, buried beneath layers of sand and time. Tonight, I'll take you deeper, further back, to a time that history has never recorded, a civilization that may have existed 10,000 years before Sumer, perhaps even 15,000 years. A civilization with superior knowledge, advanced technology, and an understanding of the universe that, even today, we still cannot explain. Who were they? Where did they come from? And why did they vanish without a trace? If you stay with me until the end of this journey, you'll witness evidence that mainstream science dares not publish, archaeological discoveries kept hidden, and a truth that might make you see yourself in a completely new light. Because if what I'm about to tell you is true, then it means you, me, all of us, carry within ourselves a piece of a much larger story. A story about humanity's true origin. So, take a deep breath. Let your body sink into gentle sleep. But keep your mind awake and ready. Because the journey we're about to take isn't just about the past, but also about the present, the future, and the lesson our ancestors left for us. A lesson about arrogance, about collapse, and about the hope that we won't repeat their mistakes. Are you ready? Then, walk with me into the long night of history. Chapter 1: The Dawn Moment of Memory. The first light of dawn begins to appear on the horizon, painting the eastern sky a soft pink. You stand on the banks of the Euphrates, where the water flows gently as it has for thousands of years. The fresh air carries moisture from the water's surface, and you hear sparrows beginning to chirp from the bushes along the riverbank. The smell of damp earth after last night's rain spreads through the space, mixed with the scent of wild grass and the gentle fragrance of scattered wildflowers blooming. Beneath your feet, fine sand sinks softly with each step. You feel the coolness of early morning seeping through your skin, but at the same time, there's a strange warmth spreading from deep within your chest, as if your soul is recognizing a place it once knew, once belonged to. Before you, the ruins of the city of Ur appear in the dawn light. Mud brick walls faded by time, ziggurats reaching high toward the sky like giant hands trying to touch the gods. This is Sumer, the civilization that every history book calls the beginning, where humans first created writing, first built cities, first organized society according to law and order. You step closer to the stone tablets inscribed with cuneiform, ancient symbols that archaeologists spent decades deciphering. You extend your finger to gently touch the rough stone surface, feeling the deep carved lines that have existed for over 6,000 years. And in that moment, a question appears in your mind. If this truly is the beginning, why is everything so perfect? Why did the Sumerians, from the very start, have a complex writing system, sophisticated architecture, and knowledge of mathematics and astronomy far beyond what a newly born civilization could achieve? Think about this for a moment. When you learn something completely new, you always go through a phase of clumsiness, mistakes, trial and error. But with the Sumerians, it seems they knew everything from the beginning. They knew how to divide a circle into 360 degrees, knew how to measure time in 60 seconds per minute and 60 minutes per hour, knew how to build architectural works that even today we still must study to understand. What does this mean? Did they learn from someone? Was their knowledge not self-developed, but inherited from an older civilization? A civilization we haven't found yet. You turn around, looking westward, where the desert stretches endlessly. The wind begins to blow stronger, carrying small grains of sand dancing in the air. And in the sound of the wind, you seem to hear the whispers of those who left long ago. They're speaking to you. They want you to know. In recent decades, archaeologists have begun to dig deeper, go further than textbooks ever taught. And they found things that cannot be explained. Beneath the layer of earth where the city of Ur was built, they found another layer of earth, thousands of years older. And in that layer of earth, there were pottery fragments, tools, traces of a civilization whose name no one knows. A civilization that, perhaps, existed and vanished before Sumer was born. Imagine you're standing in a dark room. You turn on the light and see beautiful paintings hanging on the walls. You think you're the first person to enter this room. But then you look down at the floor and see footprints. Footprints that aren't yours. Footprints of someone who was here before you long ago. That's exactly what's happening with Sumer. We thought they were the first, but beneath their feet there are footprints of others. Those who came before them. Those who knew before them. Those who built before them. You continue walking along the ruins, stepping over broken bricks, scattered pottery fragments. The sun has risen higher, brilliant yellow light shining down, illuminating the entire scene. But in that light, you see shadows, gaps in history, questions without answers. Why in Sumer's ancient texts do they always speak of gods who came from the sky, teaching them knowledge and civilization. Why did they call those gods Anunnaki, those who descended from heaven? Who were these people? Were they just mythology, or could they be real people? Survivors from an older civilization who passed on knowledge to the Sumerians. You sit down on a large rock, your eyes gazing at the flowing river. The river water is clear, reflecting the bright blue sky. And in that quiet moment, you feel a strange connection, as if you're not just looking into the past, but the past is also looking back at you, as if all of us, no matter what era we live in, are part of the same story. A story that began very, very long before Sumer existed. And here's what this story teaches you. The beginning isn't always the starting point. Sometimes the beginning is just the point where we remember. And what came before that? What lies deep beneath the layers of memory is still waiting to be discovered. So, never accept that what you've been taught is the complete truth. Always question. Always be curious. Because behind every answer, there's always a deeper question. And behind every beginning, there's always something that came before. You stand up, lightly brushing the sand dust from your clothes, and continue walking. Our journey has only just begun, and ahead, many secrets are waiting. Do you feel yourself walking with me? Do you feel what I'm feeling? If so, then continue, because the best part hasn't come yet. The wind blows gently through your hair, carrying echoes from the distant past. And in those echoes, there's an invitation. Go deeper. Go further. Search for what has been forgotten. Because only when we remember the past can we understand the present and prepare for the future. And that lesson is the gift our ancestors left for us. A gift we must open ourselves. You look up at the sky where the sun has risen high. The brilliant light makes you squint. But in that light, you see an image of people standing in this same position thousands of years ago. They also looked up at the sky. They also asked questions. They also searched. And perhaps they found the answer. An answer that now we're about to find too. Stay with me. Continue this journey. Because what we're about to discover will change everything you ever thought about your origins. And when you know where you came from, you'll know where you're going. That's why history isn't just the past. History is the mirror reflecting the future. So look into that mirror and see yourself in it. Chapter 2. The Silent Walls. The sun climbs higher in the sky, and you feel its warmth growing stronger on your skin. But now, something calls you away from the surface, away from the familiar ruins of Sumer. There's a pull, a magnetic force drawing you towards something deeper, something hidden beneath the earth where light has never reached. You follow a path that winds down into the ground, a narrow passage carved into solid rock. The temperature drops with each step you take downward. The air becomes cooler, thicker, filled with the scent of ancient stone and dampness that's lingered for millennia. You run your hand along the wall as you descend, feeling the rough texture of limestone worn smooth in places by countless hands that touched it long, long ago. How many people walked this same path? How many souls descended into this darkness, seeking answers? The passage opens into a vast chamber, and your eyes slowly adjust to the dim light filtering down from somewhere above. Before you stands something that shouldn't exist. Massive stone pillars, each one standing over 15 feet tall, carved with intricate symbols and images of animals you recognize: fox, crane, serpent, lion, and creatures you don't. Beings with elongated heads and large eyes that seem to watch you from the stone itself. This is Göbekli Tepe, a place in modern Turkey that archaeologists discovered only a few decades ago. And when they dated the stones, they found something that shattered everything we thought we knew about human history. These pillars, these massive carved monuments, are over 12,000 years old. Let that sink in for a moment. 12,000 years. That's 6,000 years before Sumer, 7,000 years before the pyramids of Egypt, 8,000 years before Stonehenge. At a time when mainstream history tells us humans were nothing but primitive hunter-gatherers, barely surviving, someone built this. Not just built it, but built it with such precision, such artistry, such advanced knowledge of engineering that even today we struggle to understand how they did it. You walk closer to one of the pillars, your footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. The sound bounces off the walls, returning to you like whispers from the past. You place both hands on the stone, and it's cold. So cold it almost burns. The pillar weighs an estimated 20 tons. 20 tons of solid limestone quarried from the bedrock, shaped with tools we haven't found, transported by methods we don't understand, and erected with a precision that rivals anything built in the modern age. But who were they? The people who built this weren't supposed to have the knowledge, the organization, or the technology. According to every history book, humans at that time were wanderers, following herds, gathering plants, living in small family groups. They didn't build monuments. They didn't create art. They didn't organize labor forces of hundreds of people to complete massive construction projects. And yet, here it stands. Undeniable. Impossible. Real. You move around the chamber, examining each pillar. The carvings are unlike anything found in later civilizations. These aren't crude scratches or simple stick figures. These are detailed, sophisticated representations. Animals in motion. Geometric patterns that seem to follow mathematical principles, and symbols that don't match any known writing system. Some archaeologists believe these symbols might be a form of proto-writing, a communication system that existed thousands of years before cuneiform or hieroglyphics. If that's true, then everything we think we know about the development of human civilization is wrong. Writing didn't begin in Sumer. It began here, or perhaps even earlier, in a place we haven't discovered yet. You sit down on the ancient stone floor, your back against one of the pillars. The silence here is profound. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of something waiting, something watching. And in that silence, you begin to hear something, not with your ears, but with something deeper, a knowing, a recognition. It's the same feeling you had at Sumer, but stronger now, more intense. You close your eyes, and images flood your mind. You see people, not primitive savages, but people dressed in woven garments. People with tools and purpose and knowledge. They're working together, hundreds of them, moving stones with a coordination that speaks of advanced planning. They're singing as they work, a rhythmic chant that helps them move in unison. And standing among them, directing them, are figures who seem different somehow. Taller, perhaps. Or maybe it's just the way they carry themselves, with an authority that comes from deep knowledge. Who were these directors? Were they priests? Kings? Or were they something else? Something that later generations would call gods. You open your eyes and the vision fades, but the questions remain. Why would people 12,000 years ago put such enormous effort into building this place? It wasn't a home. No one lived here. It wasn't a fortress. There are no defensive walls. The archaeologists call it a temple, a sacred site, a place of ritual and ceremony. But what kind of ceremony? What were they trying to accomplish? Some researchers believe Göbekli Tepe was an astronomical observatory, a place to track the movements of stars and planets. The pillars are aligned with certain celestial events, the summer solstice, the winter solstice, the rising of specific constellations. These people weren't just looking at the sky randomly, they were measuring, calculating, recording. They understood that the Earth moves in cycles, that the stars follow patterns, that time itself is a wheel that turns. But how did they know? Who taught them? You stand up and walk to the center of the chamber. From here, you can see all the pillars surrounding you in a circle. And suddenly, you understand something. This isn't just a building, it's a message carved in stone meant to last forever, meant to survive any catastrophe, any disaster, any collapse of civilization. The builders of Göbekli Tepe knew something. They knew that knowledge can be lost, that civilizations can fall, that everything can be forgotten. So they created this place as a time capsule, a way to preserve what they knew for future generations. And here's the small lesson this story teaches you. The greatest truths are often buried the deepest, not because they're false, but because they're so important that they must be protected. Sometimes what we call discovery is really just remembering. What we call new knowledge is really ancient wisdom returning to the light. Think about your own life. How many times have you learned something and felt like you already knew it? How many times have you visited a place for the first time and felt like you'd been there before? That's not coincidence. That's memory. Deep memory. Memory that goes beyond your individual life. Memory that's carried in your very DNA, passed down from ancestors who lived and loved and learned thousands of years ago. You are not separate from the past. You are the past, walking forward into the future. And every step you take is a step that someone before you has already taken. The wind, somehow finding its way into this underground chamber, stirs the dust on the floor. Tiny particles rise and dance in the thin beam of light, and watching them, you realize something else. These people, the builders of Göbekli Tepe, they didn't disappear. They're still here. In you. In me. In everyone who carries human DNA. Their knowledge might have been forgotten, their civilization might have collapsed, but their essence, their spirit, their wisdom, it survived. It survived in the stories we tell, in the myths we remember, in the dreams we have. Every culture on Earth has legends of a golden age, a time when giants walked the earth, when gods lived among humans, when people possessed great knowledge and power. We call these myths, we call them fantasy. But what if they're not? What if they're memories? Distorted by time, corrupted by countless retellings, but at their core, memories of something real. You take one last look around the chamber, trying to memorize every detail. The way the light falls on the pillars, the texture of the stone, the feeling of standing in a place where something monumentally important happened 12,000 years ago. and then you turn toward the passage that will lead you back to the surface. But you know, deep in your heart, that you're not really leaving. A part of you will stay here forever, connected to this place, connected to the people who built it, connected to the mystery that still hasn't been fully solved. As you climb back up toward the light, you hear that whisper again in the wind. Go deeper, it says. There's more. There's always more. The truth is like an onion, layer after layer after layer, and you've only just begun to peel away the surface. Do you feel the weight of what we've discovered? Do you feel the questions multiplying in your mind? Good, because questions are the beginning of wisdom, and wisdom is what we're seeking on this journey. Stay with me. The next part of our story takes us to a place even more mysterious, a place that exists in legend and myth, but might, just might, have been real. A place where an advanced civilization built wonders that would make even Göbekli Tepe seem primitive. A place that vanished beneath the waves, taking its secrets with it. But not all secrets stay buried forever. Some rise again when the time is right. And the time, my friend, is now. Chapter 3. Echoes from Atlantis. You emerge from the underground chamber into brilliant sunlight, and for a moment, you're blinded by the intensity of it. Your eyes water, and you raise your hand to shield them as they slowly adjust. But when your vision clears, something has changed. You're no longer standing in the arid landscape of Turkey. Somehow, the journey has carried you forward through space and backward through time. And now you find yourself standing on a cliff overlooking the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The wind here is different, saltier, stronger, carrying with it the ancient voice of the sea. Below you, waves crash against dark rocks, sending white spray high into the air. The sound is rhythmic, hypnotic, like a heartbeat that's been pounding since the beginning of time. You can taste the salt on your lips, feel the moisture in the air settling on your skin. Seabirds circle overhead, their cries sharp and lonely against the rumble of the ocean. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange, purple, and deep red, colors so vivid they seem unreal, like a painting by an artist who understands the language of beauty. And as you stand there, watching the light dance on the water's surface, you see something. At first it's just a shadow, a dark shape beneath the waves, but as you focus, as you let your mind open to possibilities, the shadow becomes clearer. Structures. Massive structures rising from the ocean floor, towers of stone reaching upward toward the surface, walls that extend for miles, domes and spires and buildings of such architectural complexity that they take your breath away. You blink, and the vision is gone, replaced by nothing but rolling waves and scattered whitecaps. But you know what you saw. You felt it in your bones, in that same place where you felt the truth at Göbekli Tepe. Down there, beneath thousands of feet of water, beneath layers of sand and sediment and the weight of millennia, something waits. Something that was once above the surface, once inhabited, once alive with the sounds of a civilization we can barely imagine. Is this Atlantis? The legendary island continent that Plato wrote about in 360 BC? The place he described with such precise detail, a circular island with concentric rings of water and land, protected by mountains, blessed with natural resources, home to a people of incredible sophistication and power. For thousands of years, scholars have debated whether Atlantis was real or just a philosophical allegory. Most modern academics dismiss it as fiction, a story Plato invented to make a point about the dangers of hubris and moral corruption. But what if they're wrong? What if Plato wasn't inventing a story, but recording a memory? A memory passed down through Egyptian priests, who preserved it from even older sources, who heard it from people who actually remembered the Great Flood, the Great Catastrophe, the day when an entire civilization vanished beneath the waves. You descend the cliff path, carefully picking your way down toward the beach below. The stones are slippery with sea spray, and you move slowly, deliberately, feeling each step before you commit your weight. The roar of the ocean grows louder as you descend, until it fills your ears and drowns out all other sound. When you reach the beach, you remove your shoes and walk barefoot on the wet sand. The water is cold when it washes over your feet, colder than you expected, and it pulls at the sand beneath you, trying to draw you out to sea. You walk along the shoreline, and with each step, fragments of shells crunch beneath your feet. You bend down and pick one up, a perfect spiral shell, smooth and white, polished by countless tides. Holding it to your ear, you hear the ocean's voice amplified, and in that voice, you hear something else. Words, stories, memories that don't belong to you, but somehow feel familiar. You see a great city rising from the seaplain, its white marble walls gleaming in the sunlight. Ships fill its harbors, carrying goods from every corner of the known world. Gardens overflow with flowers and fruit trees. Fountains spray water high into the air, creating rainbows in the mist. People move through wide streets, dressed in flowing robes of vibrant colors. They're not primitive. They're sophisticated, educated, their faces reflecting the confidence of people who live in a society that's mastered the arts and sciences. In the center of the city, a great temple rises, its golden dome visible for miles. And around the city, those concentric rings Plato described. Channels of water filled with ships, rings of land covered with homes and farms and workshops. This is a civilization at its peak, the culmination of thousands of years of development, a place where human potential has been fully realized. But there's something else in the vision, something darker. Storm clouds gathering on the horizon, the ground beginning to shake. People running, screaming, trying to escape something they don't understand. And then, water. Walls of water higher than buildings, crashing over everything, sweeping away in minutes what took millennia to build. The vision releases you, and you drop the shell, gasping. Your heart is pounding, and for a moment you can't tell if what you experienced was real or imagined. But it felt real. It felt like memory. Now here's the secret I mentioned earlier, the one I promised to reveal. In 2001, marine archaeologist Robert Sarmast led an expedition to a location in the Mediterranean Sea, between Cyprus and Syria. Using advanced sonar technology, his team discovered something extraordinary at a depth of 1 mile below the surface. An underwater plateau, exactly where ancient maps suggested Atlantis might have been. And on that plateau, sonar images revealed what appeared to be man-made structures. Walls, foundations. A rectangular formation consistent with ancient city planning. The discovery was announced, briefly made headlines, and then mysteriously, the story disappeared. Funding for further exploration dried up. Mainstream archaeologists dismissed the findings without investigation, and Robert Sarmast's work faded into obscurity. Why? Why would such a potentially groundbreaking discovery be ignored? Is it because accepting the existence of Atlantis would mean rewriting everything we think we know about human history? Is it because it would prove that advanced civilizations existed thousands of years before we thought possible? Or is it something else? Something about the knowledge Atlantis possessed. Knowledge that might challenge the power structures of the modern world. You walk further down the beach, your mind racing with possibilities. All around the world, there are stories of a great flood. The biblical story of Noah's Ark, the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Mesopotamia, Hindu texts describing Manu and the Great Deluge, Chinese legends of Gunyu and the flood that covered the world, indigenous Australian Dreamtime stories of the water rising and swallowing the land, Native American tales of the earth being cleansed by flood. These aren't isolated myths. They're universal memories found in every culture on every continent. And they all describe the same thing: a catastrophic flood that destroyed the world as people knew it. A flood that came suddenly, without warning. A flood that wiped out nearly everything. Geological evidence supports these stories. Around 11,600 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, something dramatic happened. The climate warmed rapidly, causing massive ice sheets covering North America and Europe to melt. Sea levels rose by more than 300 feet. Coastlines that had been inhabited for thousands of years disappeared underwater. Entire ecosystems were destroyed, and any civilizations living in coastal areas, which would have been the most hospitable and resource-rich areas, would have been completely submerged. If there was an advanced civilization 12,000 years ago, living on land that's now underwater, we'd never find it with traditional archaeology. We'd only find it if we looked beneath the waves. And that's exactly what a few brave researchers are doing. Off the coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni, divers have discovered massive stone structures that appear to be carved and shaped by human hands. Pyramids, terraces, roads, even what looks like a stadium, all resting 75 feet below the surface. Mainstream archaeologists insist these are natural rock formations, despite the right angles, the apparent staircases, the clear evidence of tool marks. Off the coast of India, in the Gulf of Cambay, sonar has revealed the ruins of two ancient cities, complete with buildings, streets, and what appears to be a massive dam. Artifacts recovered from the site have been dated to 9,500 years ago, making them older than the oldest known Indian civilization by 4,000 years. And off the coast of Cuba, deep-sea submersibles have photographed what appear to be megalithic structures, including pyramids and other buildings, at a depth of over 2,000 feet. The Cuban government and National Geographic initially showed interest, but follow-up expeditions never materialized, and the discovery remains unexplored and unexplained. Do you see the pattern? Evidence of advanced civilizations underwater, dismissed or ignored by mainstream science, left unexplored and forgotten. It's as if there's a deliberate effort to keep us from knowing our true history. But why? Here's what this part of the story teaches you. What's lost is never truly gone. It lives on in memory, in legend, in the stories we tell our children, and sometimes, if we're brave enough to look beneath the surface, literally and figuratively, we find that the myths we dismissed as fantasy are actually memories of something real. Atlantis, whether it was exactly as Plato described or something different, represents a truth that makes many people uncomfortable. The truth that we are not the first advanced civilization on Earth. The truth that humanity has risen before, achieved great things before, and fallen before. The truth that history is not a straight line of progress from primitive to modern, but a cycle, a wheel that turns, civilizations rising and falling like the tides. And if that's true, then we must ask ourselves, where are we on that wheel? Are we rising, approaching our peak? Or have we already peaked, and now we're on the downward arc, heading toward our own collapse? You pick up another shell, smaller this time, delicate and translucent. Holding it up to the fading light, you can see through it. See the intricate spiral pattern that nature has created, following mathematical principles that ancient civilizations understood. Principles encoded in the proportions of the Great Pyramid, in the architecture of Göbekli Tepe, in the design of Atlantis, as Plato described it. The golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, sacred geometry. These aren't modern discoveries. They're ancient knowledge rediscovered. The sun has nearly set now, just a sliver of orange light remaining on the horizon. The temperature drops quickly, and you feel a chill run through you. But it's not just the physical cold. It's something else. A recognition of how small you are, how brief your time on this earth is, compared to the vast sweep of history that came before and will continue long after you're gone. But that doesn't make you insignificant. On the contrary, it makes every moment more precious, every choice more important. Because you are part of this great story. You carry the DNA of people who survived the flood, who remembered the old knowledge, who passed it down through generations, despite the enormous challenges they faced. You are the living proof that wisdom survives catastrophe. If you're feeling a sense of peace right now, just write the word calm in the comments. Let me know you're feeling what I'm feeling. Let me know you're understanding what these ancient voices are trying to tell us. Because we're not alone in this. We're connected, you and I, and everyone else who's listening. Connected by this shared quest for truth, this refusal to accept the simplified version of history we've been given. You turn away from the ocean and begin walking back up the beach. The stars are beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The same stars that guided ancient sailors. The same stars that the builders of Göbekli Tepe tracked. The same stars that the people of Atlantis must have watched, never knowing that their time was running out. But we know. We have the benefit of their experience, if we're wise enough to learn from it. And what's the lesson? That nothing lasts forever? Yes, but more than that. That what matters isn't how long something lasts, but what it creates while it exists. Atlantis fell, but its knowledge didn't completely disappear. It scattered. It found new homes. It influenced the civilizations that came after. Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, the Maya. All of them carry echoes of what came before. And we carry echoes too. In our myths, in our dreams. In that strange feeling we sometimes get that we're remembering something we never learned. The path back up the cliff is easier in some ways, gravity working with you instead of against you, but harder in others. Your muscles tired, your breath coming faster in the thinning air. But you keep climbing, because that's what humans do. We climb. We reach. We strive to get higher, to see farther, to understand more. And even when we fall, we climb again. That's the gift Atlantis gives us. Not treasure, not technology, but the knowledge that we have the capacity for greatness, and the warning that greatness requires responsibility. At the top of the cliff, you pause and look back one more time. The ocean is dark now, reflecting the stars above like a mirror. And somewhere down there, the ruins wait, patient, eternal, holding their secrets until the day when humanity is ready to truly hear them. Are you ready? Are you beginning to understand what this all means? Then come with me, because our journey is far from over. Next, we travel to a place where the impossible became reality, where human achievement reached heights that still astound us today. A place in the desert where giants once walked, and where their legacy stands, defying time, defying explanation, defying everything we thought we knew about what ancient people could accomplish. The pyramids are calling, and they have something to tell you, something that will change everything. Chapter 4. The Impossible Map. The ocean fades behind you as you walk inland, and the landscape shifts once again, the way dreams shift, the way memory moves through time without needing roads or vehicles or any physical means of travel. You find yourself in a place that smells of old paper and leather, of dust that has settled for centuries, of knowledge preserved in darkness. Your eyes adjust slowly to the dim light, and you realize you're standing in an ancient library, though not one that exists anymore, not in the physical world. This is a library of memory, a place where all the lost books and forgotten manuscripts still live, waiting for someone to read them again. The ceiling soars high above you, supported by columns of dark wood that creak softly as if breathing. Shelves line every wall, reaching from floor to ceiling, packed with volumes bound in leather and cloth, scrolls tied with faded ribbons, tablets covered in languages most people have never seen. The air is cool here, deliberately kept that way to preserve these precious documents, and you can see your breath misting slightly as you exhale. You walk between the shelves, running your fingers along the spines of books, feeling the texture of aged leather, the roughness of cloth, the smoothness of vellum. Each book represents someone's life work, someone's desperate attempt to preserve knowledge for future generations, to make sure that what they learned wouldn't die with them. And here, in this imaginary library that somehow feels more real than any place you've ever been, every book that was ever burned, every manuscript that was ever lost, every scroll that crumbled to dust, they're all here, whole and readable. But you're not here to read them all. You're here for one specific document, one map that changed everything for those who understood what it meant. You find it on a large wooden table in the center of the room, as if someone knew you were coming and laid it out for you. The map is drawn on gazelle skin, the parchment yellowed with age, but still intact, still showing the incredible detail that made it famous, or infamous, depending on who you ask. This is the Reis map, created in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. You lean over it, your hands braced on the edge of the table, and study the coastlines drawn with such precision, such accuracy, that modern cartographers have verified them against satellite imagery. The map shows the western coast of Africa, the eastern coast of South America, and something else, something that shouldn't be there, the northern coast of Antarctica. But here's what makes it impossible. The map shows Antarctica without ice. It shows the coastline as it would appear if the massive ice sheet covering it were removed, revealing the actual shape of the land beneath. And the last time Antarctica was ice-free, according to geological evidence, was more than 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. How could a map from 1513 show this? Piri Reis himself provides a partial answer in notes written on the map. He explains that he compiled it from over 20 source maps, some of them dating back to the time of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, and others even older. He claims some of his source maps came from the Library of Alexandria before it burned, before thousands of years of accumulated knowledge went up in flames. But even if his source maps were ancient, that just pushes the question back further. How did people in ancient times, people who supposedly didn't have the technology for long-distance ocean travel, people who supposedly didn't understand the spherical nature of the Earth, how did they map Antarctica? Not just roughly, but accurately, with longitude and latitude correct to within half a degree. You trace your finger along the coastline, feeling the slight texture of the ink on the parchment. The mountains are marked, the bays and inlets, the peninsulas, all matching what modern ground-penetrating radar has revealed beneath the ice. This isn't guesswork. This isn't mythology. This is cartography, precise and scientific. Someone surveyed Antarctica when it was ice-free, when the climate was temperate enough to support such an expedition, when global sea levels were 300 feet lower than they are today. Someone sailed around the continent, measured the coastlines, noted the geographical features, and recorded it all. Then that information was preserved, copied, and recopied through the millennia, passing from one civilization to another, kept safe by people who understood its value, even if they didn't fully understand what it represented. Until finally, in 1513, an Ottoman admiral gathered these ancient fragments and compiled them into a single map that he thought might be useful for naval purposes, never realizing he was revealing one of the greatest secrets of human history. You straighten up and walk around the table, viewing the map from different angles. There are other impossibilities here too. The map shows the Caribbean islands with accuracy that wouldn't be achieved by European explorers until much later. It shows the Amazon River flowing from a mountain range deep in the interior of South America, something that wouldn't be confirmed until the 19th century. And most puzzling of all, it shows what appears to be a land bridge between South America and Antarctica, a connection that would have existed only during the Ice Age, before the melting ice raised sea levels and created the Drake Passage. Who were these ancient cartographers? What civilization possessed the technology and the knowledge to conduct a global survey of the Earth's coastlines? Because, make no mistake, this wasn't a local project. The Piri Reis map is just one of several ancient maps that show impossible knowledge. There's the Orientius Phineus map from 1531, which shows the entire continent of Antarctica centered on the South Pole, again ice-free, with rivers and mountains accurately depicted. There's the Buach map from 1737, which shows Antarctica as two separate land masses divided by a waterway, a fact not confirmed until the 1960s, when seismic surveys revealed that, under the ice, Antarctica is indeed two islands connected by ice. And there's the Zeno map from the 1380s, which shows Greenland accurately, without its ice sheet, revealing the mountain ranges and coastlines that we've only been able to confirm in recent decades using modern radar technology. These maps shouldn't exist. According to mainstream history, no civilization had the capability to conduct such surveys until the modern era. And yet, here they are. Undeniable evidence that someone, somewhere, thousands of years ago, did exactly that. You sit down in a heavy wooden chair beside the table, feeling the weight of this knowledge settle on your shoulders. Every map is a story. Every line drawn is a journey someone took, a risk someone accepted, a discovery someone made. And these ancient maps are stories of a world-spanning civilization, a maritime culture that sailed every ocean, charted every coast, and possessed scientific and navigational skills that rival or exceed our own. Think about what that means. While mainstream history tells us our ancestors 12,000 years ago were struggling to survive, living in small tribes, just learning to farm, these maps suggest something entirely different. They suggest a unified, global civilization, one with the resources and organization to mount expeditions to the remotest corners of the earth, one with the mathematical knowledge to calculate longitude accurately, something European navigators couldn't do until the invention of the chronometer in the 18th century. One with the desire and the means to record and preserve information for future generations.
What happened to this civilization? The same thing that happened to Atlantis. The same catastrophe. The great flood that's remembered in every culture's mythology. When the ice sheets melted and the seas rose and the coastlines where most people lived were drowned, the map survived, passed from hand to hand, civilization to civilization, their true age and origin forgotten, their impossible accuracy unexplained. Until now. Until you, sitting in this library of memory, piecing together the clues that have been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. Here's what this teaches you. True knowledge never really dies. It might be forgotten, misunderstood, dismissed as impossible or mythological. But somewhere, in some form, it survives. In a map copied from older maps. In a story passed from grandmother to grandchild. In the precise mathematical ratios encoded in ancient architecture. In the DNA that carries genetic memory of things we've never personally experienced. Knowledge wants to be preserved. Knowledge wants to be shared. That's why ancient civilizations went to such enormous effort to create maps that would last. To carve their wisdom in stone. To encode their understanding in monuments that could survive even a global catastrophe. They knew something we've forgotten. They knew that nothing is permanent. They knew that every civilization, no matter how advanced, no matter how powerful, carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. And they wanted to leave a message for whoever came after. A message saying, "We were here. We learned these things. Please don't make the same mistakes we made." You stand up and walk to a window, pulling aside a heavy velvet curtain. Outside, you can see the world as it is today. Cities spreading across the landscape, lights burning bright against the darkness. Highways carrying endless streams of vehicles, planes tracing contrails across the sky. We think we're so advanced, so much more sophisticated than any civilization that came before. But are we? The ancient cartographers mapped the world without satellites, without GPS, without computers. They calculated longitude without atomic clocks. They preserved information without digital storage. They created works of such precision that we're still trying to understand how they did it. And they did all of this while, apparently, maintaining a global network of communication and trade. Because how else could maps created in one part of the world show accurate knowledge of coastlines on the opposite side of the planet. Maybe advancement isn't just about technology. Maybe it's about understanding, about wisdom, about knowing your place in the cosmos, and accepting the responsibility that comes with knowledge. Maybe the ancients were more advanced in ways we can't measure with our modern metrics. You let the curtain fall back into place and return to the table, to the map that started this whole train of thought. The Piri Reis map. A simple piece of parchment covered in lines and notations. And yet, it proves that everything we've been taught about human history is incomplete at best, deliberately misleading at worst. According to your feelings, is all of this coincidence? Or is it causation? Is it karma? Is it the universe trying to tell us something? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what you think. Because this journey we're on together isn't just about the past. It's about understanding where we came from, so we can make better decisions about where we're going. The maps show us that ancient people achieved something remarkable. They created a global civilization based on maritime trade and navigation. They shared knowledge across vast distances. They worked together on projects that benefited all of humanity. And then it ended. The floods came. The ice melted. The coastlines disappeared. And with them, most of the evidence of what had been achieved. But not all of it. The maps survived. The knowledge survived. And now we have a choice. We can dismiss this evidence as impossible, as coincidence, as misinterpretation. We can continue believing the sanitized version of history that tells us we're the first, the most advanced, the peak of human achievement. Or we can accept the truth. We're not the first. Others came before us, built great things, learned profound truths, and then fell. And we're walking the same path they walked. The question is, will we fall too? Or will we learn from their example? You roll up the map carefully, treating it with the reverence it deserves. This isn't just a historical artifact. It's a warning. It's a gift. It's a message in a bottle, thrown into the ocean of time by people who wanted desperately for future generations to understand what they had learned. As you turn to leave the library, you notice something you hadn't seen before. On a shelf near the door, there's a small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols that seem to shift and change as you look at them. You pick it up, surprised by how heavy it is, and open the lid. Inside, there's a compass, but not like any compass you've seen before. The needle doesn't point north. It spins slowly, as if searching for something, and then stops, pointing in a direction that feels more spiritual than physical. Pointing toward truth, toward understanding, toward the next part of your journey. You close the box and slip it into your pocket, feeling its weight against your leg as you walk toward the door. Behind you, the library fades, the shelves and books and that precious map dissolving like morning mist in sunlight. But you don't need them anymore. You've seen what you needed to see. You've learned what you needed to learn. And now, it's time to continue. Outside the library, the landscape has changed again. You're standing in the desert. Night has fallen, and the temperature has dropped dramatically. Above you, the sky is clearer than you've ever seen it. Millions of stars visible. The Milky Way stretching across the heavens like a river of light. And in front of you, rising from the desert floor, dark and massive against the star-filled sky, you see them. The pyramids. The most famous monuments in the world, the most mysterious, the most impossible. And they're waiting for you. They've been waiting for thousands of years, waiting for someone who's ready to understand what they really are. Not tombs, not monuments to ego, but something far more important. Something that will change everything you thought you knew. Are you ready? Then take a deep breath. Feel the cool desert air fill your lungs. Feel the sand beneath your feet. And walk with me toward those pyramids, because they have secrets to share. Secrets encoded in their very structure, in the precise ratios of their dimensions, in their alignment with the stars. Secrets that the ancient cartographers knew. Secrets that connect everything we've discovered so far into one coherent picture. A picture of humanity's true history, and your place in it. Chapter 5. Pyramids. Message across millennia. The sand is cool beneath your bare feet as you walk across the Giza Plateau toward the Great Pyramid. Each step leaves a shallow impression that the wind immediately begins to erase, reminding you of how temporary everything human is against the vastness of geological time. Yet somehow, impossibly, these pyramids have stood for more than 4,500 years, weathering sandstorms and earthquakes, surviving conquests and empires, outlasting every civilization that's come and gone since they were built. The night air carries the scent of desert sage and ancient stone, that particular smell of rocks that have been baking in the sun for millennia, absorbing heat during the day and releasing it slowly through the cool nights. You hear the soft whisper of sand moving across the ground, pushed by a gentle breeze that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. In the distance, a nightbird calls, its cry echoing across the empty desert. Above you, the stars are so bright they cast shadows, and the Milky Way stretches across the sky like a luminous road leading to infinity. As you approach the Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khufu, you begin to comprehend its true scale. You've seen pictures, of course, everyone has, but pictures cannot convey the reality of standing before a structure that rises 481 feet into the air, that covers more than 13 acres at its base, that contains an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2.5 and 15 tons, some even heavier, with the granite blocks in the king's chamber weighing up to 80 tons each. The pyramid looms above you, its limestone facing stones long since removed, leaving the rough core blocks exposed, creating a stepped appearance that makes it look like a massive staircase for giants. You place your hand on one of the blocks at the base, feeling the rough texture of the limestone, still slightly warm from the day's heat. The stone is solid, immovable, a piece of bedrock shaped by human hands and placed here with a precision that defies explanation. You walk along the base, counting your steps, trying to get a sense of the pyramid's dimensions. 100, 200, 300 steps, and you've only covered one side. The perimeter of the base is over 3,000 feet, and it's leveled to within less than an inch across that entire distance. How? How did ancient Egyptian workers, supposedly using only copper tools and wooden sledges, achieve such precision? How did they cut 2.3 million blocks so perfectly that you can't slip a piece of paper between them? How did they transport 80-ton granite blocks from quarries 500 miles away? How did they lift them to heights of over 200 feet? The standard explanation is ramps. They built ramps out of mud, brick, and sand, and they dragged the blocks up these ramps using ropes and manpower. But the mathematics doesn't work. To build a ramp that could reach the top of the pyramid with a shallow enough grade that blocks could be dragged up it, you'd need a ramp over a mile long, requiring more material than the pyramid itself. And where is the evidence of these massive ramps? Where are the millions of bricks they would have required? They've never been found. Some theorists suggest internal ramps, spiraling up inside the pyramid itself. But ground-penetrating radar has never detected such ramps, and even if they existed, it doesn't explain how the workers had room to maneuver the massive blocks, how they lit the interior spaces before the invention of electric lighting, or how they achieved the ventilation necessary to keep workers alive in the enclosed spaces. You continue walking, circling the pyramid, and as you walk, you begin to notice something. Numbers. The pyramid is full of numbers, mathematical relationships that appear again and again with a precision that cannot be accidental. The ratio of the pyramid's height to its base perimeter is exactly the same as the ratio of a circle's radius to its circumference. In other words, the pyramid encodes the value of pi, 3.14159, accurate to several decimal places. But according to mainstream history, pi wasn't calculated to that accuracy until the Greeks did it 2,000 years after the pyramid was built. The pyramid's base perimeter, when measured in the ancient Egyptian unit called the royal cubit, equals exactly 365.24, the number of days in a solar year, including the fractional day that necessitates leap years. The pyramid's height, when multiplied by 43,200, equals the polar radius of the Earth. The pyramid's base perimeter, when multiplied by 43,200, equals the equatorial circumference of the Earth. These aren't approximations. These are precise calculations, accurate to a degree that requires detailed knowledge of the Earth's dimensions, knowledge that supposedly wasn't available until the modern era, when we had satellites and advanced surveying equipment. You stop walking and look up at the apex of the pyramid, so far above you that it seems to touch the stars themselves. And suddenly you understand. This isn't a tomb. This has never been a tomb. No mummy has ever been found in the Great Pyramid. No hieroglyphics decorate its walls. None of the funerary texts that cover every other pyramid and tomb in Egypt. This is something else entirely. This is a monument to knowledge. A three-dimensional mathematical equation carved in stone. A message from the builders to anyone in the future who has the wisdom to read it, saying, "We knew. We understood the world we lived on. We measured it. We calculated it. And we encoded that knowledge here, so it could never be lost." But there's more. You walk to the entrance on the north face of the pyramid, the original entrance that was sealed until the 9th century, when Caliph al-Mamun tunneled into the pyramid, searching for treasure. You climb through the narrow passage, moving carefully in the darkness, your hands on the smooth walls to guide you. The passage slopes downward at an angle of exactly 26 degrees, and after about 100 feet, it levels out and opens into a chamber carved deep into the bedrock beneath the pyramid. This is the subterranean chamber, unfinished according to Egyptologists, abandoned according to the official story. But you see something different. The floor of this chamber is rough, uneven, as if it was deliberately left that way. And in one corner, there's a pit, descending even deeper into the rock, going down and down until it disappears into darkness. You don't go down into that pit. Something about it feels wrong, feels dangerous, as if it leads to places that humans weren't meant to go. Instead, you return to the ascending passage, climbing now, moving upward through the heart of the pyramid. The
passage is cramped, forcing you to bend over, your shoulders brushing both walls. The air is stale, dusty, and you can feel the immense weight of stone above you, millions of tons pressing down. And yet, the passages don't collapse, the chambers don't crack. The pyramid has stood for 4,500 years without any internal structural failure, despite earthquakes that have leveled cities, despite the fact that it was built without steel reinforcement, without concrete, without any of the engineering materials we consider essential for large-scale construction. The ascending passage opens into the Grand Gallery, and here you can finally stand upright. The gallery stretches before you, rising at the same 26-degree angle, but now the ceiling soars 28 feet above your head, and the walls are corbelled, each course of stone projecting slightly inward, creating a sense of upward movement, as if the space itself is reaching toward something higher. You walk up the Grand Gallery, your footsteps echoing in the confined space, and you notice more precision. The gallery is exactly 153 feet long. The walls are polished smooth, and carved into the side walls are a series of notches, 27 pairs of them, evenly spaced, their purpose unknown, but clearly deliberate. At the top of the Grand Gallery, you must crouch again to pass through a low passage that opens into the king's chamber. This is the heart of the pyramid, the chamber where, according to Egyptologists, the pharaoh Khufu was supposedly buried. But again, no mummy, no treasures, nothing except an empty granite sarcophagus sitting in the middle of the room. You enter the chamber and immediately feel different. The air here has a quality you can't quite describe. It feels dense somehow, pressurized, as if you're in a space that exists slightly outside of normal reality. The chamber is made entirely of red granite, blocks so large and so perfectly fitted that you can barely see the joints between them. The walls are smooth, almost glassy, reflecting the dim light in subtle ways. The ceiling is made of 9 massive granite slabs, each weighing about 50 tons, spanning the 17-foot width of the chamber without any support pillars. Above those 9 slabs are 5 more chambers, stress-relieving chambers, according to Egyptologists, built to distribute the weight of the pyramid and prevent the king's chamber from being crushed. But engineers who've studied the design say those chambers aren't necessary for structural support. The pyramid would be perfectly stable without them. So why are they there? You walk to the sarcophagus and place your hands on its rim. It's carved from a single piece of red granite, hollowed out with a precision that modern stoneworkers struggle to replicate. The interior dimensions are exact. The walls are parallel to within thousandths of an inch, and when you tap on it, it rings like a bell, producing a deep, resonant tone that seems to vibrate through your entire body. Some researchers believe the Great Pyramid was never a tomb at all, but rather a sophisticated machine, a power plant perhaps, or an acoustic device, or something even more exotic that we don't have the knowledge to understand. The shafts that run from the king's chamber, supposedly air shafts, don't actually exit the pyramid. They dead-end inside the structure. Their purpose unclear, but their construction precise. The shafts are aligned with specific stars. The southern shaft points to Orion's belt, the northern shaft to the pole star, as they appeared in 2450 BC, the supposed construction date. Though some astronomical calculations suggest the alignment might actually correspond to 10,500 BC, pushing the date of the pyramid back by 8,000 years. You stand in the center of the chamber, close your eyes, and simply feel. And what you feel is power.
not electrical power,
though some believe the pyramid once generated electricity using the water flow from underground rivers. Not mechanical power, though the precise engineering suggests the builders understood forces and stresses at an advanced level. But something else, something that touches consciousness, that alters perception, that creates a connection between the individual standing in this space and something larger, something cosmic. People who've spent time in the king's chamber report strange experiences, feeling time slow down or speed up, hearing sounds that have no physical source, seeing visions of geometric patterns or ancient symbols, feeling presences, as if the builders themselves are still here somehow, watching, waiting, hoping that someone will finally understand what they created. And here's what this teaches you. The greatest achievements aren't always what they appear to be. Sometimes what looks like one thing is actually something completely different. A tomb that isn't a tomb. A monument that's actually a message. A building that's really a book. Its chapters written in stone. Its meaning encoded in measurements and ratios that transcend language. The pyramids prove, beyond any doubt, that ancient people possessed knowledge we've only recently rediscovered. They understood mathematics, geometry, astronomy, engineering, architecture, acoustics, perhaps even physics, in ways that mainstream science is only beginning to acknowledge. But more than that, they understood something we've forgotten. That knowledge must be preserved. That civilizations are temporary, but wisdom can be eternal if you encode it properly. If you make it solid enough, precise enough, meaningful enough, that even after thousands of years, even after your culture is gone and your language is dead and your history is forgotten, the knowledge remains, waiting for someone with eyes to see and a mind to understand. You open your eyes and look around the chamber one more time. In the flickering light, the granite walls seem almost alive, pulsing with some inner energy. And you realize something profound. This chamber, this pyramid, this entire complex at Giza, it wasn't built for the dead. It was built for the living. It was built for us, for this moment, for the time when humanity would be advanced enough to measure it, sophisticated enough to analyze it, humble enough to admit that perhaps we don't know as much as we think we know. The pyramid is a teacher, and we're finally becoming ready to be students. You leave the king's chamber, descending back through the grand gallery, through the narrow passages, out into the open desert air. The night is still dark, though there's a hint of dawn on the eastern horizon, that subtle lightening of the sky that promises sunrise. And as you stand there, looking at the three pyramids of Giza, arranged in a pattern that exactly matches the three stars of Orion's belt as they appeared 12,000 years ago, you understand something else. These pyramids weren't built 4,500 years ago. Or rather, they were rebuilt then, renovated, restored by the Egyptians of the 4th dynasty. But the original construction, the original design, the original purpose, that comes from much earlier, from before the flood, from the civilization we've been tracking through all these chapters, the civilization that mapped Antarctica, that built Göbekli Tepe, that became the legend of Atlantis. The pyramids are their legacy, their time capsule, their gift to the future. And we're just now beginning to unwrap it. Do you feel the significance of this? Do you feel how everything we've discovered connects? Leave a comment, tell me what you're thinking, because we're approaching something important, a revelation that will tie everything together. But first, there's one more mystery to explore, one more piece of evidence that will make the pattern undeniable. Rest for a moment.
breathe the cool desert air. Feel the ancient stones around you. Because in the next part of our journey, we're going to discover something that mainstream science says is impossible. Evidence that giants once walked the earth. Evidence that's been systematically hidden, suppressed, locked away where the public can't see it. And we're going to ask the question, why? Why would anyone want to hide the truth about humanity's past? What are they afraid we might learn? The answers might surprise you. They might challenge everything you believe. But that's why you're here, isn't it? To find truth, no matter where it leads. So stay with me. The night is darkest just before dawn, and our dawn is coming. Chapter 6. The Giants and the Hidden Bones. The dawn breaks slowly over the desert, painting the pyramids in shades of gold and amber. And as the first rays of sunlight touch the ancient stones, you feel the temperature begin to rise. But you're no longer in Egypt. The journey has carried you forward, through time and across space, and now you find yourself standing in front of a large institutional building, all gray stone and tall windows, with carved columns flanking the entrance and broad steps leading up to heavy wooden doors. This is a museum, though which museum you're not entirely sure, because in this dreamlike journey, it could be any of them. The Smithsonian in Washington, the British Museum in London, the Louvre in Paris, or any of the hundreds of other repositories where humanity's past is supposedly preserved and displayed for public education. You climb the steps slowly, your hand trailing along the cold marble balustrade, and push open one of the massive doors. Inside, the air is cool and still, temperature controlled to preserve the artifacts, and it smells of floor polish and old things, that particular scent of museums everywhere, a mixture of preservation chemicals and the accumulated dust of ages. Your footsteps echo on the polished floor as you walk through the entrance hall, past the information desk, where no one sits, past the gift shop with its postcards and replica artifacts, into the exhibition halls themselves. The main hall is vast, with a vaulted ceiling that rises at least 50 feet above you, and it's filled with display cases containing pottery and tools and jewelry from ancient civilizations. You walk past Egyptian sarcophagi, past Mesopotamian tablets, past Greek statues and Roman coins, all meticulously labeled with dates and provenance and scholarly explanations. But you're not here for these things. You're here for what's hidden, what's kept in the back rooms, in the storage areas where the public never goes, in the archives that require special permission to access. You find a door marked Staff Only, and somehow it's unlocked, swinging open silently when you push it. Beyond is a corridor, dimly lit, with doors on either side leading to offices and workrooms. You walk down this corridor, past laboratories where conservation work is done, past libraries filled with rare books and unpublished research papers, until you reach a stairwell that descends into the basement levels. Down you go. 1 flight, 2 flights, 3 flights, deeper into the building where the temperature drops and the air becomes musty with the smell of old cardboard and mothballs and things long forgotten. At the bottom of the stairs is another door, this one heavy and metal, like a vault door. And when you pull it open, you find yourself in a vast storage room that stretches away into the darkness. Rows upon rows of shelving filled with boxes and crates, artifacts that have never been displayed, items that were cataloged and stored and then never looked at again. You walk between the shelves, your eyes adjusting to the poor light, reading labels on boxes as you pass. Most are mundane. Pottery fragments from such and such excavation, stone tools from such and such site. Nothing that would seem out of place in a museum storage facility. But then, you see a box, labeled differently. The writing faded and old. The catalog number from a system no longer in use. You pull this box down from the shelf, surprised by its weight, and set it on a dusty table nearby. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth, you find bones. Large bones. Impossibly large bones. A femur, the thigh bone, but not from any human you've ever seen. This bone is over 3 feet long, thick and heavy, and when you hold it up to the light, you can see that it's genuine. Not a fossil, not a replica, but actual bone, though ancient beyond measure. You set the femur down carefully and search for more boxes with similar markings. You find them, dozens of them, hidden away on shelves in the darkest corners of the storage room. And as you open them, you discover more giant bones. Skulls with eye sockets the size of grapefruits, vertebrae as large as dinner plates, ribs that curve in arcs, suggesting a chest cavity big enough to hold a small car. These are the bones of giants, human or humanoid, but standing perhaps 10 to 12 feet tall, maybe even taller. And they're real. You can touch them, feel the weight of them, see the growth patterns in the bone structure that prove these were living beings, not deformities, not frauds, but actual members of a population of giant people who once walked the earth. But why are they here, hidden in storage? Why aren't they on display in the main halls where millions of visitors could see them and wonder about them and ask questions about them? The answer, of course, is that they challenge the accepted narrative. According to mainstream anthropology, humans have always been roughly the same size we are today, perhaps slightly shorter in ancient times due to nutrition, but never dramatically different. Giants, if they existed at all, are the stuff of mythology, fairy tales told to frighten children or explain natural phenomena that primitive people didn't understand. Except, there are too many reports to dismiss them all as myth. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, newspapers across America regularly reported the discovery of giant skeletons. In 1856, workmen in East Wheeling, Virginia, unearthed a skeleton measuring over 11 feet tall. In 1877, prospectors near Eureka, Nevada, found a leg bone and kneecap that suggested a person standing 12 feet tall. In 1912, a mining operation in Lovelock Cave, Nevada, discovered numerous giant skeletons, some with red hair still preserved. In 1947, a mining company in Death Valley, California, broke through a rock wall and found a series of caverns containing mummified remains of people 8 to 9 feet tall, dressed in leather clothing and holding strange metal artifacts. The reports go on and on, from every state, from every decade, until suddenly, in the mid-20th century, they stop. Not because giants stopped being found, but because when they were found, the bones were confiscated by institutions like the Smithsonian, cataloged, and then disappeared into storage, never to be seen again. You pick up one of the skulls, cradling it carefully in your hands. It's clearly human in structure, or mostly human, but the proportions are wrong for a normal human skull enlarged. The cranial capacity is enormous, suggesting a brain perhaps 3 times the size of a modern human brain. The jaw is heavy, the teeth large, but human-like, not the teeth of an ape or any other primate. This was a thinking, reasoning being, capable of language, of tool use, of culture. Who were they? The legends are consistent across cultures. The Bible speaks of the Nephilim, giants who lived before the flood, described as the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. The Book of Enoch, removed from most versions of the Bible, but preserved in Ethiopian Christianity, describes these giants in great detail, saying they were violent and oppressive, consuming all the resources of the earth, leading to their destruction in the flood. Greek mythology speaks of titans, giant beings who ruled before the Olympian gods, who were eventually overthrown and imprisoned in Tartarus. Norse mythology speaks of Jotuns, giants who constantly warred with the gods of Asgard. Native American tribes across North America have legends of giant red-haired people who were cannibalistic and cruel, who were eventually hunted to extinction by coalitions of smaller tribes. Hindu texts describe Daityas and Danavas, giant demonic beings who possessed great power and knowledge. The Sumerian king list mentions kings who reigned for thousands of years before the flood, superhuman figures who may have been of greater stature than normal humans. Even in relatively recent history, there are accounts. The explorer Magellan reported that his crew encountered giants, men standing 12 feet tall, in Patagonia in 1520. Spanish conquistadors wrote about fighting giant warriors in the Americas. Early American colonists recorded meetings with Native American chiefs who stood over 9 feet tall. Could all of these accounts be lies, exaggerations, or misunderstandings? Possibly. But when you add the physical evidence, the bones that keep being found and then hidden, the pattern becomes harder to dismiss. You set the skull back in its box, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Wonder at the discovery, anger at the cover-up, and something else. A kind of sadness for these beings, whoever they were, whose existence has been erased from history, whose bodies have been locked away, whose story has been deliberately suppressed. Why? Why would institutions dedicated to knowledge and education hide evidence of giants? The official explanation, when one is offered at all, is that the bones are misidentified, that they're actually the bones of extinct megafauna like mammoths or mastodons, that people unfamiliar with paleontology mistook these for human remains. But that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. The 19th century reports often include detailed descriptions by doctors and scientists who examined the bones and confirmed their human characteristics: the structure of the pelvis, the articulation of joints, the presence of human teeth and skulls. And besides, people in the 1800s were familiar with large animal bones. They'd seen cattle and horses and bears. They knew what animal skeletons looked like, and they specifically identified these as human. So we're left with a more disturbing possibility, that the suppression is deliberate, that there's a conscious effort to maintain a specific narrative about human origins and development, a narrative that doesn't allow for the existence of giant humans, because that would raise too many uncomfortable questions. If giants existed, where did they come from? Were they a separate species? A branch of the human family tree that's been left out of the official evolutionary narrative? Were they the survivors of an earlier, more advanced civilization? The one that built Göbekli Tepe and mapped Antarctica? Are they the gods and demigods that every ancient culture remembers? Not supernatural beings, but flesh and blood people, whose size and longevity made them seem godlike to smaller, shorter-lived humans. And most importantly, what happened to them? Why did they disappear? You walk deeper into the storage area and find more anomalous items that have been tucked away and forgotten. Stone tools too large for normal human hands to use comfortably. Armor and weapons sized for people 8 or 9 feet tall. Footprints preserved in stone. Human footprints, but 18 inches long and proportionally wide. And photographs. Old photographs from the 19th century showing excavations where giant skeletons lie in the ground, with regular-sized humans standing next to them for scale. These photographs exist in archives, in private collections, in the files of historical societies, but they're never published in textbooks, never discussed in mainstream archaeology, never mentioned in museum exhibitions. It's as if there's a line that's been drawn. Information on one side of the line is acceptable, can be studied and discussed and taught. Information on the other side is unacceptable, must be ignored or dismissed or hidden. But why? What's the threat? Here's what this part of the story teaches you. Sometimes the truths that are buried deepest are the ones that challenge power. Not physical power necessarily, but the power to define reality, to control what people believe about themselves and their place in the world. If giants existed, if they were real and powerful and present throughout ancient history, then the story we've been told about human development, the slow, gradual progress from primitive to civilized, from ignorant to enlightened, that story becomes questionable. Instead, we might have to accept a more complex picture, one where human history includes rises and falls, where advanced civilizations existed in the deep past, where beings that we consider mythological were actually real, where our ancestors weren't primitive at all, but were in some ways more knowledgeable, more capable, more connected to deep truths than we are today. That's a threatening idea to institutions that derive their authority from being the gatekeepers of knowledge. If people start questioning the official history, start thinking that maybe the old myths contain real information, start trusting their own research and intuition over expert pronouncements, then the experts lose power. So, the bones are hidden. The photographs are ignored. The newspaper accounts from a century ago are dismissed as hoaxes or misunderstandings. And slowly, over generations, the memory of giants fades, until most people don't even know there's a question to ask. But you know now. You've seen the bones. You've held them in your hands. And you can never unknow what you've learned. You make your way back through the storage area, leaving the boxes as you found them, climbing the stairs back up to the public areas of the museum. When you emerge into the main exhibition hall again, everything looks the same. The orderly displays, the confident labels, the narrative of steady progress from simple to complex. But you see it differently now. You see the gaps. You see what's missing. You see the story they're not telling. And outside, the sun is fully up, the morning bright and clear, and you step out into it, feeling changed. The world is not what you've been told it is. History is deeper, stranger, more mysterious than the textbooks admit. And somewhere, in museums and universities and government archives around the world, there's evidence of all of this. Evidence that's been locked away, waiting for the day when humanity is ready to face its true past without fear. Are you ready? Can you handle the implications of what we're uncovering? because we're not done yet. There's more to discover, more pieces to fit together. And the picture they're creating is extraordinary. A vision of human history that includes advanced ancient civilizations, global catastrophes, lost knowledge, and yes, giants walking among our ancestors, leaving footprints in stone that we're only now beginning to acknowledge. You take a deep breath, feeling the weight of all this knowledge settling into your bones. And you think about that lesson again, about what gets buried and why. Not everything that's hidden is false. Sometimes, the opposite is true. Sometimes, the things that threaten the established order are hidden precisely because they're real, because they're powerful, because if people knew about them, everything would change. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for things to change. Maybe it's time to dig up what's been buried, to shine light into the dark corners, to ask the questions we've been told not to ask. Because only by knowing our true past can we create a better future. Only by understanding where we came from can we decide where we're going. And only by facing the full complexity of human existence, with all its mysteries and anomalies and uncomfortable truths, can we hope to fulfill our potential as a species. The giants are part of our story. They're part of your story. And their bones, hidden in museum basements, are crying out to be remembered, to have their existence acknowledged, to reclaim their place in the human family. Will you remember them? Will you honor their memory? Leave a comment if this resonates with you. Tell me if you've heard family stories about giant bones being found. Share your thoughts about why this information might have been suppressed. Because this journey we're on together is about more than just learning facts. It's about reclaiming our heritage, our full heritage, everything our ancestors were and did and knew. And that includes the giants who walked among them. Come with me now. Our journey continues, and the next stop is perhaps the most profound yet. A place where language itself reveals the truth, where words carry memory, where the unity of ancient humanity is preserved in the very syllables we speak. We're going to discover that all languages, no matter how different they seem, trace back to a common source. And that source existed before Babel, before the confusion of tongues, in a time when humanity spoke as one. And what they spoke about, the knowledge they shared, will astound you. The truth is waiting. Are you ready to hear it? Chapter 7. The Lost Global Language. You leave the museum behind, stepping into streets that seem to shift and blur around you. And suddenly you're somewhere else entirely, somewhere that exists outside of normal geography, in a space between memory and imagination. You find yourself standing in what can only be described as a library, but not like the one where you saw the ancient maps. This is different, older, more ethereal, as if it exists at the intersection of all times and all places. The air here shimmers with a golden light that has no obvious source, and you can hear something, a sound like distant voices speaking in unison, a chorus of humanity across millennia. All the words ever spoken, all the languages ever formed, all flowing together like streams merging into a great river. The shelves here don't hold books in the traditional sense. Instead, they hold something more fundamental, sounds themselves, syllables and phonemes and morphemes, preserved in crystal vessels that glow softly with inner light. You reach out and touch one of these vessels, and immediately your mind fills with understanding. You hear the word for mother in 1,000 languages. Mama, mater, Ima, Ama, Mai, Madre. And you realize they're all the same word, just slightly different pronunciations of the same fundamental sound that human babies make naturally when they first begin to vocalize. This is the library of language, the repository of every word humanity has ever spoken. And as you walk through it, you begin to see patterns that mainstream linguistics either doesn't recognize or deliberately ignores. Languages that are supposed to be completely unrelated, that developed in isolation on different continents, contain the same root words, the same grammatical structures, the same ways of expressing fundamental concepts. How is that possible? Unless, at some point in the distant past, all humans spoke the same language. The Tower of Babel story in the Bible tells us that humanity once shared a common tongue, and that God confused their languages to prevent them from completing their tower to heaven. But what if that story, like so many others we've explored tonight, is not supernatural mythology, but a memory of actual events? What if there really was a time when all humans spoke the same language? And what if that linguistic unity was broken not by divine intervention, but by a catastrophe that scattered humanity across the globe and isolated populations from each other for thousands of years, long enough for their speech to diverge and develop into the thousands of languages we have today? You walk to a section of the library where the oldest languages are kept. Sanskrit, the ancient language of India; Sumerian, the language of the civilization we started with; Egyptian hieroglyphics, the language of the pyramid builders, and others even older. Languages that have been lost, that exist now only in fragments carved on stone, or preserved in the oldest layers of living languages, like sediment at the bottom of a river. You take down a vessel containing Proto-Indo-European, the reconstructed ancestor language that linguists believe gave rise to most European languages, plus Persian, Hindi, and many others. When you open this vessel, the sounds that emerge are strange but somehow familiar. Syllables that your tongue wants to form, even though you've never heard them before, as if they're encoded somewhere deep in your genetic memory. Proto-Indo-European is a fascinating case study because it's a language that no one speaks anymore, that exists only in the careful reconstructions of scholars who've worked backward from living languages to figure out what their common ancestor must have sounded like. And what they've discovered is remarkable. This ancestral language was sophisticated, complex, with a rich vocabulary and intricate grammar, not at all what you'd expect from supposedly primitive people. The speakers of Proto-Indo-European had words for wheeled vehicles, for domesticated horses, for complex kinship relationships, for legal concepts and religious practices, and astronomical observations. These weren't simple hunter-gatherers grunting at each other. These were cultured people with advanced knowledge, and they spread this language across a vast geographical area, stretching from Ireland to India, from Scandinavia to the Mediterranean. But here's what's even more interesting. When linguists look deeper, when they compare Proto-Indo-European with other ancient language families like Semitic, the family that includes Hebrew and Arabic, or Sino-Tibetan, the family that includes Chinese and many other Asian languages, or Bantu, the family of many African languages, or the indigenous languages of the Americas, they find similarities that shouldn't exist if these languages developed independently. Words for basic concepts like water, fire, stone, sun, moon, hand, foot, words you'd expect to be completely different in unrelated languages, often show striking similarities. The word for water, for instance, appears in Proto-Indo-European as wodr, in Hebrew as Mayim, in the Egyptian as Mu, in the Nahuatl language of the Aztecs as Atl, and in Proto-Austronesian as Wahir. And while these look different at first glance, linguistic analysis shows they follow predictable sound change rules from a single ancient source. Some linguists, the brave ones willing to challenge orthodoxy, have proposed that all human languages ultimately derive from a single proto-human language, sometimes called proto-world or proto-sapiens, that was spoken perhaps 50,000 years ago or more. Mainstream linguistics rejects this idea, claiming it's impossible to reconstruct a language that old, that too much time has passed, that the signals have been lost in the noise. But what if they're wrong? What if linguistic evidence, combined with everything else we've discovered tonight, points to something they're not willing to see? You move to another section of the library where the evidence is more concrete, where scholars have documented specific word parallels that can't be explained by coincidence or independent development. The word for dog, for example, appears in Proto-Indo-European as wo,
in Chinese as go, in Eskimo-Aleut as quimic, in Proto-Mayan as tsi. Too similar across too many supposedly unrelated language families to be accidental. The word for two, the number two, is dwo in Proto-Indo-European, in Sumerian, duo in Chinese, rua in many Austronesian languages, following a pattern that suggests common origin. And it's not just vocabulary. Grammatical structures also show parallels. The way languages form questions, the way they indicate past and future tense, the way they express possession and relationship. These fundamental structures are surprisingly similar across language families that supposedly had no contact with each other. You sit down at a reading table in the library, and spread before you materializes a chart showing the relationships between language families, lines connecting them like a family tree. But instead of the many separate trees that mainstream linguistics proposes, you see what the evidence actually suggests. A single tree with many branches, all growing from the same root. And that root, that original human language, would have been spoken by the global civilization we've been tracking, the civilization that built Göbekli Tepe and mapped Antarctica and constructed the pyramids and lived in the time before the flood. When that civilization fell, when the catastrophe scattered the survivors to isolated pockets around the world, their common language began to fragment, each isolated group developing their own dialect, which over thousands of years became distinct languages, which spawned their own daughter languages, creating the diversity we see today. But the original unity is still there, buried beneath the layers of change, waiting for anyone with the patience and insight to excavate it. And here's what this teaches you. Separation is an illusion. At a deep level, we're all connected. Not just genetically, though that's true too. DNA evidence shows all humans share common ancestors. But linguistically, the words we speak, no matter what language we speak them in, ultimately come from the same source. They're echoes of the original human tongue, the language spoken by our most distant ancestors, the language that gave names to the world when it was young. Think about what that means for a moment. When you speak to someone in a different language, even if you don't understand each other's words, at a fundamental level, you're both accessing the same deep structure, the same patterns of thought and expression that have been passed down through hundreds of generations. The words are different,
but the meaning-making mechanism is the same. We all use symbols to represent reality. We all use grammar to show relationships between concepts. We all tell stories to make sense of our experiences. Language isn't just a tool for communication. It's a repository of cultural memory. Every language contains embedded within it the history and worldview of the people who speak it. And when we dig deep enough, we find memories that go back before any particular culture. Back to the time when all humans were one people, speaking one language, sharing one body of knowledge. Some of that ancient knowledge is preserved in etymology, the study of word origins. The English word disaster, for example, comes from Latin and literally means bad star, preserving ancient knowledge of astrology and the belief that celestial events influence earthly affairs. The word consider comes from Latin and means with the stars, again showing that decision-making was once connected to astronomical observation. The word lunatic, meaning crazy, comes from Luna, the moon, preserving the ancient observation that some mental conditions worsen during the full moon, something modern medicine has largely dismissed, but which some recent studies are beginning to validate. These aren't just interesting factoids. They're evidence that our ancestors encoded real knowledge in language itself.
Knowledge about the world and how it works. Knowledge that we've largely forgotten, but which remains, waiting to be rediscovered in the very words we use every day. You stand up from the table and walk deeper into the library, into sections that contain even older linguistic artifacts. The first words humans ever spoke, the original naming of things. And as you move through this space, you begin to hear something extraordinary. All the languages of the world, past and present, begin to resonate together, their differences fading away, revealing the underlying unity, the original frequency from which they all diverged. And in that moment of perfect linguistic harmony, you understand something profound. Language isn't random. It's not just arbitrary sounds assigned to meanings. There's a deep structure, almost musical, that connects sound to significance in ways that science is only beginning to understand. Ancient languages knew this. They understood that words had power, that speaking something gave it reality, that naming something gave you power over it. That's why in many traditional cultures, people have secret, true names that they don't share. Because to know someone's true name is to have power over them. It's why in the Bible, God creates the world through speech. Let there be light, and there was light. The word and the thing being inseparable. It's why in Hindu philosophy, Om is the primordial sound from which the universe emerges, the vibration that contains and creates all other sounds. This isn't superstition. It's a recognition of something real, something that quantum physics is now beginning to describe in scientific terms, that observation affects reality, that consciousness and the physical world are interconnected, that information and energy are two aspects of the same fundamental substrate. Ancient people didn't have our scientific terminology, but they understood these principles intuitively, and they encoded that understanding in language itself, in the structure of their grammar, in the sounds of their words, in the stories they told. And all of that wisdom and knowledge and understanding comes from a time before the languages diverged, a time when humanity spoke as one, thought as one, worked together on projects that benefited all. The Tower of Babel wasn't a punishment. It was a tragedy, the breaking of unity, the beginning of division and misunderstanding and conflict.
as different groups could no longer communicate easily, could no longer share knowledge freely, could no longer see themselves as one human family. But the memory of that unity persists in the deep structures of language, in the parallels between supposedly unrelated tongues, in the universal human capacity for speech and symbolic thought. We all share the same cognitive architecture, the same language processing mechanisms in our brains, because we all descend from the same source population, the global civilization that existed before the catastrophe. You make your way toward the exit of the library, but before you leave, you take one more vessel from the shelf, this one containing the most ancient words of all, the original human vocabulary. And when you open it, you don't hear distinct words so much as pure meaning, concepts that transcend any particular language. Love, fear, wonder, hunger, safety, danger, home, stranger. All the fundamental human experiences that every language has words for, because every human needs to express them. These are the true universal constants of human experience, the things that unite us across all apparent differences. And they remind you that despite the thousands of languages we speak today, despite the cultural variations that make us seem so different from each other, at our core, we're all the same. We all want the same basic things. We all face the same fundamental challenges. We all share the same deep heritage. And here's the small lesson this chapter teaches you. Communication is more than words. It's the attempt to bridge the gap between one consciousness and another, to make your inner reality comprehensible to someone else. And every time we successfully communicate, every time we truly understand and are understood, we're recreating in miniature the unity that once existed. The time before Babel, when all humans spoke with one voice. In your own life, when you communicate with others, remember this. Beneath the surface differences of dialect and accent and vocabulary, you're both accessing the same fundamental patterns. You're both participating in the same ancient human tradition of meaning-making through language. And if you listen carefully enough, if you speak honestly enough, you can bridge any linguistic or cultural divide, because the deep structure is universal. Language is memory. Every word you speak connects you to countless ancestors who spoke similar words. Every sentence you form follows patterns established tens of thousands of years ago. You are speaking with voices that echo back to the very beginning of human consciousness. And every time you communicate successfully, you honor that heritage. You step out of the library of language and find yourself in yet another landscape. But we're getting closer now, closer to the heart of the mystery, closer to the final revelations that will bring everything together. Because language is knowledge, and knowledge connects us to the cosmos itself. And our next destination is a place where ancient people demonstrated astronomical understanding that rivals our own, where they encoded cosmic cycles in stone and structure, where they showed without question that they were not primitive or ignorant, but sophisticated and wise in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. The stars are calling, as they've called to humans since the beginning. And it's time for us to answer. Stay with me. The most beautiful part of our journey is just ahead, where earth and sky meet, where human understanding touches the infinite, where the true scope of ancient wisdom becomes undeniable. Are you ready to look up? Are you ready to see what our ancestors saw when they gazed at the heavens? Then come. The stars are waiting. They've been waiting for thousands of years, and they have stories to tell. Stories written in light and motion. Stories that reveal the deepest secrets of time itself. Chapter 8. When the Stars Remember. The library dissolves around you like morning mist touched by sunlight, and you find yourself standing in the middle of a vast open plain under a sky so dark and clear that it takes your breath away. There are no city lights here, no electric glow to wash out the heavens, only pure darkness, allowing the cosmos to reveal itself in all its glory. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of liquid light, so bright you can actually see its structure, the dense core, the spiral arms, the dark lanes of dust that run through it like veins. You've never seen so many stars, thousands upon thousands of them, more than you ever imagined existed. Each one a sun like ours, perhaps with its own planets, its own possibility of life. The air is crisp and cool, carrying the scent of wild grass and earth, and you can hear the wind moving across the plain, a sound like the earth itself breathing. You're not alone here. Scattered across the plain you can see dark shapes, standing stones, massive upright megaliths arranged in patterns that seem random until you look more carefully and realize they're aligned with precision, marking specific points on the horizon where the sun rises on the solstices, where certain stars appear at certain times of year, where celestial events can be predicted and tracked. This is Stonehenge, or perhaps Karnak, or maybe Nabta Playa, or any of the hundreds of ancient astronomical sites that dot the globe. From the British Isles to the Sahara Desert, from the Americas to Asia, everywhere humans have lived, they've built structures to track the heavens, suggesting a knowledge of astronomy that was universal, that crossed all cultural boundaries, that united ancient humanity in a shared fascination with the cosmos. You walk toward the nearest standing stone, your footsteps silent on the soft grass, and when you reach it, you place both hands on its rough surface. The stone is cold, so cold it almost burns your palms, and you can feel its solidity, its permanence. This stone has stood here for thousands of years, and will stand for thousands more, outlasting empires, outlasting languages, outlasting everything except the stars themselves. The stone is aligned perfectly north-south. You can tell even in the darkness, and when you sight along its edge, you see it frames a particular point on the horizon, where, you somehow know, the star Sirius rises at dawn on the summer solstice. This isn't accidental. This is deliberate. This is ancient people using stones as massive as houses to create a permanent astronomical observatory, a calendar in stone that will function correctly for millennia. But why? Why would supposedly primitive people invest such enormous effort in tracking the stars? The standard explanation is that they needed calendars for agriculture, needed to know when to plant and harvest. But that doesn't really make sense. You don't need to track the precession of the equinoxes or the heliacal rising of specific stars to know when spring arrives. You can tell by the weather, by the plants, by dozens of simpler cues that don't require moving 50-ton stones and aligning them with sub-degree precision. No, these astronomical monuments served a deeper purpose. They were encoding knowledge, preserving information about cosmic cycles that take not years, but millennia to complete. Information that could only be gathered by continuous observation over thousands of years. Information that ancient people considered so important that they literally carved it in stone to make sure it wouldn't be lost. You walk between the standing stones, and as you do, you begin to see the patterns they create. Not just simple alignments, but complex geometries that track multiple celestial phenomena simultaneously. This stone marks the summer solstice sunrise. That stone marks the winter solstice sunset. This group of stones creates a triangle that points to where the moon rises at its northern extreme. That arrangement marks the equinoxes. And when you stand in the center and look up, you realize the stones frame specific stars, creating a map of the heavens reflected on the earth below. This is archaeoastronomy, the study of how ancient cultures understood and tracked celestial phenomena. And it's a field that has, in just the past few decades, revolutionized our understanding of prehistoric peoples. Sites that were once dismissed as random stone arrangements or primitive religious structures have been revealed through careful astronomical analysis to be sophisticated instruments, observatories and calendars, and even computers. Mechanical devices for calculating planetary positions and predicting eclipses. Take the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901. It's a device made of bronze gears and wheels, dated to around 100 BC. And when researchers finally figured out how it worked, using X-ray tomography and computer modeling, they discovered it was an analog computer designed to predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets, to calculate eclipse cycles, to track the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games, a level of mechanical sophistication that wasn't seen again until the invention of astronomical clocks in medieval Europe over 1,000 years later. But if the Greeks in 100 BC could build such a device, who taught them? Where did that knowledge come from? The answer, as we've seen throughout this journey, is always the same. From an older civilization, from people who came before, from a global culture that possessed astronomical knowledge we're only now beginning to fully appreciate. You continue walking across the plain, and the landscape shifts subtly around you. The stones rearrange themselves. And now you're standing in a different astronomical site. This one in the jungle. Massive stone temples rising from the forest floor, covered in carvings that depict celestial events with startling accuracy. This is Angkor Wat in Cambodia. And while it's famous for its architecture and its Buddhist symbolism, it's also one of the most sophisticated astronomical monuments ever built. The entire complex is aligned to track the spring equinox. The causeway leading to the main temple is oriented so that on the equinox, the sun rises directly over the central tower, and the proportions of the temple itself encode astronomical cycles. The number of columns, the dimensions of courtyards, the height of towers, all correspond to cycles of the sun and moon, to the precession of the equinoxes, to periods that take 26,000 years to complete. How did the builders of Angkor Wat, constructing their temple in the 12th century AD, know about astronomical cycles that take 26,000 years to observe? They couldn't have discovered this through their own observations. It would require continuous astronomical records going back hundreds of centuries. Records that don't exist. Or rather, records that exist, but are dismissed as mythological. The ancient Hindu texts that speak of vast cosmic cycles, of yugas lasting millions of years, of the universe being created and destroyed in endless cycles. These aren't fantasies, they're memories. Distorted by time, perhaps, but based on real astronomical knowledge passed down from the ancient civilization that had the time and the stability to conduct multi-generational observations of the heavens. The stars themselves are moving, not quickly, but if you watch for long enough, If you keep records for generation after generation, you begin to notice that the pole star changes, that the position where the sun rises on the equinox slowly shifts, that the constellations visible at certain times of year gradually change over centuries and millennia. This is precession, caused by a slow wobble in the Earth's axis of rotation, taking approximately 26,000 years to complete one full cycle. And ancient people knew about it. They tracked it. They considered it important enough to encode in their most sacred monuments and texts. The Great Pyramid at Giza, which we visited earlier, is aligned to true north with an accuracy of less than 1/20th of a degree. But interestingly, it's not aligned to current north. It's slightly off. And when you calculate where true north was when the alignment was perfect, you get a date of approximately 10,500 BC, over 8,000 years before the pyramid was supposedly built, suggesting either that the pyramid is much older than mainstream archaeology admits, or that the builders in 2500 BC were deliberately aligning their pyramid to commemorate a date from 8,000 years earlier. Either possibility is fascinating and troubling for conventional history. The Sphinx at Giza, according to some researchers, shows water erosion patterns consistent with exposure to heavy rainfall. But the Giza Plateau hasn't seen that kind of rainfall since the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 BC. Again, suggesting the Sphinx is much older than officially claimed. And when you look at what constellation the Sphinx was facing at dawn on the spring equinox in 10,500 BC, you find it was looking directly at the constellation Leo, the lion, while the Sphinx itself has the body of a lion. Is this coincidence? Or is the Sphinx a marker, a massive stone monument created to commemorate that specific astronomical moment? You find yourself now standing at a different site, in the Americas this time, among the ruins of a Mayan city, temples and pyramids rising from the jungle, covered in glyphs and astronomical calculations. The Maya were obsessed with time. They had multiple calendar systems running simultaneously. The 260-day Tzolk'in, the 365-day Hab, the 52-year calendar round, and the long count, which tracked days from a mythological starting point in 3114 BC. And their calculations were so precise that their measurements of the lunar month were more accurate than the Gregorian calendar we use today. More accurate than what European astronomers achieved until the late 19th century. The Maya tracked Venus with particular intensity. They knew its synodic period, the time it takes Venus to return to the same position relative to Earth and the Sun, to an accuracy of 0.08 days over 500 years. This requires centuries of continuous observation and sophisticated mathematical tools to calculate. And they encoded this knowledge in their long count calendar, in the intervals between certain dates, in the architecture of their temples, which were often aligned to Venus rising or setting. But here's what's most intriguing. When you trace Mayan astronomy back through their records, back through their oral traditions, back through the astronomical knowledge encoded in sites like Chichen Itza and Tikal, you find that they claim their knowledge came from their gods, from beings called the plumed serpent, Kukulkan or Quetzalcoatl, who came from across the sea, brought civilization, taught astronomy and mathematics and writing, and then departed, promising to return. Sound familiar? It's the same pattern we see everywhere. Every ancient culture claims their knowledge came from someone else, from gods or ancestors, or beings from the sky, or across the sea. From people who were here before, who taught and then vanished. You sit down on a stone step of a Mayan pyramid, looking up at the stars, the same stars the Maya watched, the same stars that every human has watched, since we first became conscious enough to wonder what those lights in the sky might be. And you think about what it means that ancient people all over the world possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge, that they tracked cycles taking thousands of years to complete, that they considered this knowledge important enough to encode in their most permanent structures. It means they understood something we've forgotten. They understood that Earth is not separate from the cosmos, that what happens in the heavens affects what happens here, that we're part of a larger system, participants in cosmic cycles that dwarf human timescales, but which nevertheless influence human affairs. Ancient people lived closer to natural rhythms. They watched the sky every night, not through telescopes, but with naked eyes made keen by necessity. And over time, over generations, they learned the patterns. They discovered the cycles. They realized that this bright light here is actually a planet, that these stars that seem scattered randomly actually form patterns, constellations that rotate through the seasons, that the sun's path across the sky changes throughout the year, that eclipses follow predictable patterns, that time itself is cyclical, not linear. And here's what this teaches you. When you pay attention, when you observe patiently over long periods, you begin to see patterns that aren't obvious in the short term. This is true in astronomy, but it's also true in life. The cycles of your own existence, the rhythms of your own consciousness. They follow patterns too. Patterns you can learn to recognize and work with, rather than against. Ancient people understood this deeply. They saw themselves as part of nature, not separate from it, not controlling it, but participating in it, dancing with it, moving in harmony with cycles larger than themselves. And that understanding gave them wisdom that our modern culture, with all its technology and all its science, has largely lost. We think we've conquered nature, think we've transcended natural limits. But that's an illusion. We're still subject to the same forces that governed ancient people: gravity, entropy, the cycles of life and death, the movements of planets and stars. The only difference is, we've stopped paying attention, stopped watching the patterns, stopped trying to align ourselves with the larger rhythms of existence. You stand up and continue walking through the Mayan site, running your hands along carved glyphs that depict astronomical events from thousands of years ago, events that the carvers couldn't have witnessed, but which they recorded anyway, because the knowledge had been passed down, because their ancestors had seen and remembered and taught, creating a chain of knowledge stretching back unbroken to the time before the catastrophe, to the time when all humanity shared a common astronomical understanding. In your own experience, have you ever felt the pull of natural cycles? The way your mood shifts with the seasons, the way you feel different during the full moon, the way certain times of day are better for certain activities. That's your body, your consciousness responding to rhythms that ancient people consciously tracked and honored. Write the word calm if you're feeling this connection, if you're beginning to understand that you're not separate from these cosmic cycles, but woven into them. The sky is beginning to lighten now, the first hint of dawn touching the eastern horizon. And you know that if you wait here, you'll see the sun rise exactly where the Maya predicted it would, aligned with some architectural feature of the temple, marking some significant date in their calendar, demonstrating once again that these people weren't primitive, weren't ignorant. weren't lucky guessers. They were sophisticated astronomers who understood the cosmos in ways that challenge our assumptions about the development of human knowledge. But our journey isn't finished. There's one more place to visit, one more piece of the puzzle to examine, and it's perhaps the most important one, because it brings us full circle, back to the questions we started with. Who were we before the catastrophe? What knowledge did we possess? What happened to cause the fall? And most critically, are we in danger of repeating the cycle? The final chapter awaits, where all the threads we've followed, the monuments, the maps, the giants, the languages, the astronomical knowledge, where all of these come together into a single, coherent picture, a vision of humanity's true past, and perhaps a warning about our future. Come with me, one more time. The journey is almost complete, and the revelation waiting for you will change how you see everything. Will give you a gift that the ancients left specifically for this moment, for the time when humanity would be ready to remember, ready to reclaim its heritage, ready to step forward into a future informed by the wisdom of the past. The stars are fading now as dawn approaches, but they'll return tonight, as they do every night, eternal and patient, waiting for humans to look up again, to remember again, to reconnect with the cosmic dance that we never really left. We just forgot we were dancing. Are you ready for the final revelation? Are you ready to understand your place in this vast story? Then walk with me, one last time, into the light of a new dawn, where past and present merge, where ancient and modern become one, where you discover that you're not just learning about history, you are history. You are the living continuation of everything we've explored. You carry it all within you, waiting to be awakened. Let's finish this journey together. Chapter 9. Who are we? The answer in silence. The dawn breaks fully now, spilling light across the ancient stones. And as the first rays of the sun touch your face, you feel something shifting, not just in the landscape around you, but within yourself, as if every step of this journey has been preparing you for this moment, this final understanding that will tie everything together and reveal the truth that's been hidden in plain sight throughout all of human history. You're walking now, moving across terrain that seems to blend all the places you've visited tonight. The desert of Mesopotamia, the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, the library of forgotten knowledge, the museum basement with its hidden bones, the pyramid plateau, the standing stones, the Mayan temples, all of them flowing together like scenes in a dream. Because that's what this has been, hasn't it? A kind of waking dream. A journey through memory, both personal and collective, both individual and universal. And now you find yourself back where you started, standing in the desert at dawn, facing the ruins of ancient Sumer. But you're seeing it differently now, with eyes opened by everything you've learned, with understanding deepened by each revelation. And what you see is not a beginning, but a continuation. Not the first civilization, but one of many that rose from the ashes of what came before. The wind picks up, swirling the sand around your feet. And in the patterns it makes, you begin to see images, scenes from that ancient time before the flood, before the catastrophe that reset human civilization and forced us to start again. Almost from scratch, but not quite. Because we carried with us memories, fragments of the old knowledge, seeds that would eventually grow into the civilizations we know from history. You see a world much different from the one we know today. The climate warmer, the seas lower by hundreds of feet, exposing vast coastal plains that are now underwater. And on those plains, cities, not primitive villages, but genuine cities, with harbors and ships, with buildings of cut stone and copper tools, with agriculture and irrigation, and all the markers of civilization. And most importantly, with people who understood that the earth was round, who tracked the stars with precision, who mapped their world accurately, who possessed mathematical and astronomical knowledge that wouldn't be rediscovered for thousands of years. This was the golden age that every culture remembers, the time before the fall, when humanity lived in relative harmony, when knowledge flowed freely across a connected world, when maritime trade linked continents, when a shared language allowed the exchange of ideas, when giants and normal humans coexisted, when the children of the gods, whatever that means, walked among mortals and taught them the secrets of civilization. But something went wrong. You see that too in the swirling sand images. You see hubris, arrogance, the belief that because they had achieved so much they were invincible, that their civilization would last forever, that they had conquered nature rather than learning to live in harmony with it. You see them building higher, reaching further, pushing boundaries that perhaps shouldn't have been pushed, developing technologies that sound almost magical from our perspective, but which might have been real, advanced enough to seem like magic, but actually based on principles of physics and energy that we're only now beginning to rediscover. And then, catastrophe. You see it happening in the vision the sand creates, the ice that had covered much of the northern continents for tens of thousands of years suddenly melting, not gradually, but rapidly, perhaps triggered by a comet impact or a solar event or a shift in the Earth's magnetic field. Something that caused a dramatic warming in just a few years or decades. The ice sheets that were miles thick collapse, sending unimaginable amounts of water flowing into the oceans, raising sea levels by more than 300 feet, drowning the coastal plains where most people lived, destroying harbors and cities and farms, erasing in a matter of months what had taken millennia to build. The survivors fled inland to higher ground, carrying what they could, but most of the knowledge, most of the infrastructure, most of the accumulated wisdom of centuries was lost, buried under water and silt, preserved only in memory. And as the generations passed and people struggled just to survive in a harsher post-flood world, those memories became stories. The stories became myths, and the myths were eventually dismissed as fantasy by people who had forgotten what their ancestors once knew. But not everything was lost. The survivors who made it to high ground eventually recovered, began building again, and while they couldn't recreate the full glory of what had been destroyed, they could preserve pieces of it, which is why we see, suddenly appearing in the archaeological record around 10,000 years ago, advanced knowledge of agriculture, of animal domestication, of astronomy and mathematics, not developing slowly from scratch, but appearing almost fully formed, as if someone who already knew how these things worked was teaching people who had forgotten. This is why Göbekli Tepe appears out of nowhere, a sophisticated temple complex built by people who supposedly hadn't even invented agriculture yet. It wasn't built by hunter-gatherers discovering civilization for the first time. It was built by survivors of the flood, people who remembered the old ways, who wanted to preserve the sacred knowledge, who created this monument as a time capsule for future generations. This is why the ancient maps show impossible knowledge. They weren't created by the civilizations that possessed them. They were copied from older maps, maps that had survived the catastrophe, maps that showed the world as it was before the flood. And those maps were treasured and recopied generation after generation, until some of them survived into historical times, where they confound modern scholars. This is why the pyramids encode astronomical and mathematical knowledge. They were built by people who had inherited fragments of the old wisdom, who wanted to preserve it in the most permanent form possible, in massive stone structures aligned to the stars, structures that would survive any future catastrophe and testify to what humanity had once achieved. This is why languages show evidence of common origin, because before the scattering, before the isolation of populations after the flood, there really was a time when all humans shared a common tongue, when communication flowed freely, when humanity worked together as one people, pursuing common goals. This is why giant bones keep being found and then hidden away, because they're evidence of the world before the flood, evidence that challenges the simplified narrative of human evolution that modern science has constructed, evidence that we're not the first advanced civilization, that others have risen and fallen before us. You see all of this now, standing in the desert as the sun rises higher, warming the air, burning away the morning mist. And you understand what it means. You understand that human history is not a steady progression from primitive to modern, from ignorant to enlightened, but a cycle. Civilizations rising, reaching their peak, becoming overconfident, forgetting their connection to the natural world and then falling, usually catastrophically, leaving only ruins and memories for the next cycle to discover and wonder about. And here's where it gets personal. Here's where this journey from ancient history to the present moment becomes directly relevant to you, standing here, reading these words, living in this time. Because we are living at a peak. Our civilization has achieved things that would seem like magic to people just a few centuries ago. We've split the atom. We've mapped the genome. We've sent robots to Mars. We've connected the entire world through digital networks. We've accumulated more knowledge than any previous civilization in recorded history. But we've also become disconnected. Disconnected from nature, from natural rhythms, from the understanding that we're part of a larger system, not separate from it, not above it, not in control of it. We've built our cities on coastlines, just like the ancients did, making ourselves vulnerable to rising seas. We've altered the climate through our activities, just like some theories suggest the ancients might have done. We've developed technologies whose long-term consequences we don't fully understand. Nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, things that could uplift us or destroy us, depending on how wisely we use them. We've reached heights of achievement, but we've also displayed the same hubris that preceded every previous fall. The belief that this time is different, that we're smarter than our ancestors, that we've overcome the limitations that brought down earlier civilizations, that our technology will save us from any consequences of our choices. But the pattern is clear, and the lesson is unavoidable. Civilizations fall not from lack of technology, but from lack of wisdom, from forgetting that there are limits, that there are consequences, that actions have results that compound over time, that the natural world has its own rhythms and cycles that don't care about human ambitions or human hubris. And so the question becomes, what do we do with this knowledge, now that we understand our true history? Now that we see the pattern clearly? Now that we know we're not the first, and that every civilization before us eventually fell? How do we respond? Do we continue on the same path, assuming we're somehow different, somehow immune to the cycles that claimed everyone before us? Or do we learn from their example? Do we change course? Do we reclaim the wisdom that our most ancient ancestors possessed? The understanding that we're part of nature, not separate from it. That sustainability isn't optional. That humility isn't weakness, but survival strategy. That preserving knowledge for future generations isn't about building monuments to ourselves, but about ensuring that if we fall, the next cycle can rise higher, can avoid our mistakes, can break the pattern. Here's what I believe, and here's the final lesson that this entire journey has been building toward. You are not just a passive observer of history. You are an active participant in it. Every choice you make, every action you take, every value you hold and pass on to others contributes to whether our civilization continues or collapses, whether we break the cycle or repeat it. The ancients left us messages, carved in stone, encoded in monuments, preserved in myths and legends. And those messages all say the same thing. We tried to warn you. We tried to leave you the knowledge you'd need. We tried to show you that technology without wisdom leads to disaster, that power without humility leads to fall, that forgetting your connection to the earth and to each other leads to catastrophe. But they also left us hope, because the fact that you're here, that humanity survived and rebuilt and rose again, that shows resilience. That shows that even after total collapse, even after the destruction of everything we've built, the human spirit endures. Human knowledge survives in some form. Human potential remains undiminished. We carry within us the capacity to create civilizations of incredible sophistication. But we also carry the capacity to destroy them. And which capacity manifests depends entirely on the choices we make, individually and collectively. So what's the answer? The answer to the question posed at the beginning: who are we? Where do we come from? What is our true history? The answer is this: we are the descendants of people who have risen and fallen multiple times. We carry within our DNA, within our collective unconscious, within the deepest structures of our languages and our brains, the memories of all those previous cycles. We are both the students and the teachers, both the question and the answer, both the problem and the solution. We come from a time before history, from a golden age that became a cautionary tale, from a civilization that achieved greatness and then lost it, but in losing it, ensured that the knowledge would survive in fragments, scattered across the world, preserved in different forms, waiting for a time when humanity would be ready to piece it back together and understand what it means. And our true history is not what you find in textbooks, not the simplified narrative of steady progress from caves to cities. Our true history is complex, cyclical, filled with heights and depths, with achievements and catastrophes, with wisdom gained and wisdom lost. We've been here before, at this same crossroads, facing similar choices. And what happened then will happen again, unless we learn, unless we change, unless we choose differently. The sun is fully risen now, the desert blazing with light and heat, and you're standing in the ruins of Sumer, looking at the broken walls and fallen stones that once were part of thriving cities. And you understand that these ruins aren't just relics of the past. They're warnings about the future. They're saying, this is what happens when civilization peaks and forgets its foundation. When technology outpaces wisdom. When confidence becomes arrogance. But they're also saying something else. They're saying, you have the power to choose. You have the knowledge we lacked. You can see the pattern we couldn't see because we were living in it. You can make different choices. You can break the cycle. You can be the generation that learns from the past, rather than repeating it. And that's the gift. That's the true treasure that's been waiting for you at the end of this journey. Not gold, not technology, not some secret that will give you power over others, but understanding. The understanding that you matter, that your choices matter, that history is not something that happens to you, but something you participate in creating. Every time you choose connection over isolation, every time you choose humility over arrogance, every time you choose to preserve knowledge rather than hoard it, every time you choose sustainability over convenience, every time you choose wisdom over mere intelligence, you're voting for a different future. You're pushing against the cycle. You're increasing the chances that this time, finally, humanity will get it right. In your own life, starting today, you can embody the lesson that the ancients tried to teach us. Live in harmony with natural rhythms. Respect the earth that sustains you. Share knowledge freely. Maintain humility even as you achieve success. Remember that you're part of something larger than yourself, a story that stretches back tens of thousands of years and forward into a future you'll never see, but which you're helping to create. Do you agree with what I'm saying? Do you feel the truth of it resonating in your bones? If you do, leave a comment with the number 1. If you disagree, leave a number 2. Because this conversation doesn't end here. This is just the beginning. The moment when you wake up to your true heritage and decide what you'll do with that knowledge. The wind is picking up again, swirling the sand into small dust devils that dance across the desert floor. And as you watch them, you realize you're seeing a metaphor. Individual grains of sand, each one tiny and seemingly insignificant, but together, moved by forces larger than themselves, creating patterns, building dunes, shaping the landscape over time. And you are like those grains of sand. One person among billions, but connected to all of them. Part of a pattern that's larger than you can see from your limited perspective, contributing in ways you may never fully understand to the shape of human destiny. The ruins around you begin to fade, the desert dissolving back into the formless space from which this journey emerged, and you realize you're returning to your own time, your own place, your own life, but changed, transformed by what you've seen and learned, carrying with you now a burden and the blessing. The burden of knowledge, of understanding what's at stake, of seeing the pattern that most people don't see, and the blessing of purpose, of knowing that your life has meaning beyond the immediate, beyond the personal, that you're part of a story that matters, that every choice you make echoes through time in ways both subtle and profound. As the vision fades completely and you find yourself back in ordinary consciousness, back in your own time and space, take a moment to reflect on everything you've experienced tonight. The monuments that shouldn't exist, the maps that show impossible knowledge, the giant bones hidden in museum storage, the languages that reveal common origin, the astronomical understanding that predates recorded history, the evidence everywhere. Once you know how to look, that we are not the first, that others came before, that we're part of a cycle that has repeated multiple times across the vast expanse of human existence. But take heart in this. Cycles can be broken. Patterns can be interrupted. The future is not predetermined. We have agency. We have choice. We have the accumulated wisdom of all previous civilizations to draw upon, if we're humble enough to listen, if we're brave enough to change, if we're wise enough to see that the greatest achievement isn't building higher towers or faster machines, but learning to live sustainably, harmoniously, with full awareness of our place in the cosmic order. This is what the ancients knew. This is what they tried to preserve for us. This is what their monuments and maps and myths have been trying to tell us across the millennia. You are children of the stars. You are participants in cosmic cycles. You are both ancient and new, carrying within you the potential for greatness and the danger of hubris. Choose wisely. Choose humbly. Choose with full awareness of what came before and what might come after. And if you can do that, if you can embody that wisdom in your daily life, then perhaps, just perhaps, this cycle will be different. Perhaps we'll be the generation that doesn't fall, that doesn't repeat the mistakes of the past, that learns to live in balance with the earth and with each other, that preserves and extends human knowledge rather than destroying it, that reaches for the stars not from arrogance, but from wonder, not from conquest, but from curiosity, not from a desire to dominate, but from a wish to understand and participate in the great cosmic dance. The journey is ending, but your journey, your personal journey with this knowledge, is just beginning. And where it leads depends entirely on you, on the choices you make, on the values you hold, on the wisdom you cultivate. The ancients did their part. They left the clues. They preserved the knowledge. They built monuments that would survive millennia. Now it's your turn. What will you do with what you've learned? How will you embody this wisdom? How will you contribute to breaking the cycle? These are questions only you can answer, but know this: you're not alone. Everyone who's taken this journey with us tonight, everyone who's heard these words and felt their truth, everyone who's opened their mind to possibilities beyond the conventional narrative, you're all connected now. Part of a global awakening, a remembering of what we once knew, a reclaiming of our true heritage. And that gives me hope. Hope that this time will be different, that we will learn, that we will change, that we will be worthy of the gift our ancestors left us, the gift of knowledge preserved through catastrophe, the gift of wisdom encoded in stone and story, the gift of understanding that we are not alone, not the first, not isolated in time, but part of an unbroken chain stretching back to the very dawn of human consciousness and forward into a future we're creating with every choice we make. The stars are still there, above you, though you can't see them in the daylight. They're always there, constant, patient, eternal. and they're watching. Watching to see what we'll do. Watching to see if we'll finally learn the lessons that they've been trying to teach us since we first looked up in wonder and asked, "What are those lights? Where do we come from? Who are we?" And the answer has always been the same. You are stardust. You are ancient. You are connected to everything that is, and was, and ever will be. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself. You are the answer to the question existence asks. And your purpose, your true purpose, is to remember, to understand, to choose wisely, to live fully, to carry the light of consciousness forward into the unknown future with humility and wonder and hope. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for opening your mind to these possibilities. Thank you for being willing to question the conventional narrative and seek deeper truth. And if you want to continue this exploration, if you want to hear more stories about the mysteries of our past and what they mean for our future, then stay with us. Subscribe to this channel and join us every night as we travel through time and space and consciousness, seeking the wisdom that our ancestors left for us, the wisdom that might just save us from repeating their mistakes. Good night, or good morning, wherever you are in this beautiful world. And remember, you are part of something larger. You matter. Your choices matter. And together, if we choose wisely, we can break the cycle and create a future worthy of our incredible past. Sweet dreams, and may the wisdom of the ages guide your path. The final revelation, the gift of causation. But wait, before you fully return, before you open your eyes completely and step back into ordinary reality, there's one more thing. One final piece that needs to be spoken. One last truth that ties everything together and reveals the deepest secret of all. The secret that the ancients understood better than we do. The secret that explains not just what happened, but why it happened. Not just the pattern of rise and fall, but the underlying principle that governs it. The law that operates whether we acknowledge it or not. The truth that could change everything if we truly understood and embodied it. You're floating now in that space between sleeping and waking, between the journey and the return. And in this liminal space, you can see clearly, without the filters of belief or ideology or cultural conditioning. You can see the simple truth that underlies all of existence. And that truth is this: everything is connected. Every action has consequences. Every choice ripples outward through time and space in ways we can barely comprehend. This is what the ancients called karma, what physicists call cause and effect, what ecologists call interconnection, what mystics call the web of existence. It's all the same fundamental principle. You cannot do anything in isolation. You cannot act without affecting the whole. You cannot take without giving. You cannot destroy without harming yourself. Because you are not separate from the world. You are the world, experiencing itself through this particular point of consciousness. The civilization that fell, that ancient global culture we've been exploring all night, they forgot this. They achieved so much, built so high, learned so much, that they began to believe they were above natural law, that they could manipulate and control without consequences,
that they could take more than they gave back, that they could treat the earth as a resource to be exploited rather than a living system to be respected and nurtured. And that forgetting, that disconnection from the fundamental truth of interconnection, that was their downfall. Not the flood itself, which was just the mechanism, but the consciousness that made them vulnerable to it, the arrogance that prevented them from seeing the warning signs, the hubris that made them believe they were invincible. And we are making the same mistake, right now, in this moment. Our civilization has achieved extraordinary things. No one can deny that. But in achieving them, we've convinced ourselves that we're separate from nature, that natural laws don't apply to us, that we can emit carbon without changing the climate, that we can destroy ecosystems without harming ourselves, that we can create technologies without considering their long-term impacts, that we can pursue endless growth on a finite planet. And all of this comes from the same fundamental error, the belief in separation, the illusion that you are a separate self in a world of separate things competing for limited resources, trying to get yours before someone else gets theirs. But that's not reality. That's a story we tell ourselves, a story that leads inevitably to suffering, to conflict, to collapse. The truth is interconnection. The truth is that your well-being and my well-being and the well-being of every living thing on this planet are inseparable. That what harms one ultimately harms all. That what heals one ultimately heals all. This isn't mystical nonsense. This is basic ecology, basic systems theory, basic physics. Everything affects everything else. The butterfly in Brazil whose wings contribute to the hurricane in Texas. The factory in China whose emissions warm the Arctic. The choice you make today, whose consequences ripple forward through time to affect people not yet born. It's all connected. It's always been connected. And the ancients understood this deeply, viscerally, in a way that we've lost. They built their civilizations around this understanding. They created rituals and ceremonies designed to maintain awareness of interconnection. They told stories that reinforced the principle of karma, of consequence, of reciprocity. They organized their societies around the idea that everyone has a role to play, that each person contributes to the whole, that the health of the community depends on the health of each member, and vice versa. They weren't perfect, obviously. They still fell. They still made mistakes. But they tried. They attempted to live in accordance with natural law, to maintain balance, to give back what they took, to honor the cycles of nature, rather than fighting against them. And when they forgot, when they started believing their own mythology, when they convinced themselves that their achievements made them special, made them exempt from natural law, that's when the seeds of their destruction were planted. Not by angry gods, not by random catastrophe, but by the inevitable consequences of violating the fundamental principle of interconnection. You cannot take indefinitely without giving back. You cannot ignore natural limits without eventually hitting them. You cannot treat the earth as dead matter without deadening something in yourself. And when enough people, when an entire civilization loses this understanding, collapse becomes inevitable, not as punishment, but as correction, as the system rebalancing itself, as nature reasserting the truth that was temporarily forgotten. So, here's the real question, the question that matters more than any other. Have we learned, or are we destined to repeat the cycle once more? Will we acknowledge the truth of interconnection and change our behavior accordingly? Or will we continue on our current path until the earth corrects our errors?
in ways that will be catastrophic for billions of people? The answer isn't predetermined. We have choice. We always have choice, but the consequences of our choices are not negotiable. If we choose connection, if we choose sustainability, if we choose to live in accordance with natural law, then we create conditions for continued thriving, for civilization to persist and evolve, for our children and grandchildren to inherit a world that's livable and beautiful. But if we choose separation, if we choose exploitation, if we choose short-term gain over long-term sustainability, then we create conditions for collapse. And no amount of technology, no amount of wealth, no amount of power will save us from the consequences of violating fundamental natural law. The ancients tried to tell us this. That's what all their monuments and myths and sacred texts are ultimately about. They're saying, we learned this lesson the hard way. We achieved greatness and then lost it because we forgot the fundamental truth. Please don't make the same mistake. Please remember that you're part of nature, not separate from it. Please live accordingly. That's the message encoded in the pyramids, in the astronomical alignments, in the maps that show Antarctica ice-free, in the legends of the flood, in every story of a golden age followed by catastrophe. They're all saying the same thing. Connection is survival. Separation is death, literally and figuratively. And now you know. You've taken this journey. You've seen the evidence, you've felt the truth of it in your bones. And you cannot unknow it. You cannot go back to unconscious living. You cannot pretend that your choices don't matter, that your actions don't have consequences, that you're not responsible for participating in creating the future. That burden is yours now. But it's also a gift. Because with this understanding comes power. The power to choose differently, to live consciously, to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. To honor your ancestors by learning from their mistakes rather than repeating them. In practical terms, what does this mean? It means consuming less and giving more. It means questioning the narrative of endless growth and choosing sufficiency instead. It means recognizing that you have enough, that you are enough, that the desperate striving for more that characterizes modern life is actually a symptom of feeling disconnected. And the cure isn't getting more stuff, but reconnecting with what really matters, with nature, with community, with purpose, with the understanding that you're part of something larger than yourself. The sun is blazing now at its zenith, the heat intense, shimmering waves rising from the sand, and you can feel yourself fully returning, the journey complete, the vision delivered. But the understanding remains, etched into your consciousness like those ancient inscriptions carved into stone, impossible to erase, permanent, transformative. A gift that the ancients left specifically for this moment, for the time when humanity would be advanced enough to understand the evidence, but humble enough to learn from it. This is what they wanted you to know. That history moves in cycles, that civilizations rise and fall according to whether they honor or violate natural law. That the choice is always ours, in every moment, in every action, in every thought that becomes deed. We are choosing which future to create. We are voting with our lives for the kind of world that will exist. And the cumulative effect of all those individual choices determines whether this cycle ends like all the others, or whether we finally break the pattern and create something sustainable, something beautiful, something worthy of the incredible potential that lies within human consciousness when it's aligned with truth rather than enslaved to illusion. The ancients are with you now. Can you feel them? Their presence in the wind that moves across the desert, in the light that illuminates the ruins, in the silence that holds all sound, in the emptiness that contains all form. They're not ghosts, not supernatural beings, but living presences preserved in the structure of reality itself, in the information that never dies, in the patterns that repeat across time, in the wisdom that waits patiently to be rediscovered generation after generation after generation. They're speaking to you through these words, through this journey you've taken, through the resonance you feel when truth is spoken. They're saying, we see you, we know you, we are you, separated only by time, which is itself an illusion. We made mistakes so you wouldn't have to. We fell so you could learn to fly. We died so you could live more fully, more consciously, more aligned with the fundamental truth of existence. Honor us by living differently. Honor us by choosing wisely. Honor us by breaking the cycle that we couldn't break. You have advantages we didn't have. You can see the pattern from outside because we've lived it and recorded it. You can choose differently because you know where the old choices lead. You have the gift of our experience. Use it well. Use it wisely. Use it to create the future that we dreamed of but couldn't manifest. And as you return completely now, as the vision fades and ordinary consciousness reasserts itself, as you find yourself back in your own time and place and body, remember this feeling. Remember this understanding. Remember that you've been given a gift, not just information, but transformation. Not just knowledge, but wisdom. Not just history, but prophecy. Because the past predicts the future only if we repeat the same patterns, but we have the power to choose differently, to write a new ending to this ancient story, to be the generation that finally learns, that finally grows up, that finally accepts responsibility for our collective impact on this beautiful, fragile, infinitely precious planet we all share. You matter more than you know. Your choices ripple further than you can see. Your consciousness contributes to the collective field that determines what manifests in physical reality. This isn't mysticism. This is quantum physics. This is systems theory. This is the simple truth that the whole is more than the sum of its parts, and that each part affects the whole. You are powerful beyond measure, not because you're special in the sense of being separate or superior, but because you're connected, because you're part of the web, because what you do affects everything and everyone. And that power comes with responsibility. The responsibility to choose wisely, to live consciously, to embody the wisdom that the ancients tried so hard to preserve for exactly this moment. So as you go forward from here, as you re-enter your life with all its demands and distractions and challenges, carry this understanding with you. Let it inform your choices. Let it guide your actions. Let it transform your consciousness from one of separation to one of connection, from one of fear to one of love, from one of grasping to one of giving, from one of resistance to one of flow. Because that transformation, multiplied across millions or billions of individuals, is what creates the shift, is what breaks the cycle, is what manifests the future that serves all beings rather than just a few, that sustains rather than depletes, that unifies rather than divides. The ancients bless you. The earth holds you. The cosmos celebrates you. The future awaits you. And all of it, all of existence, is calling you to step fully into your power, your purpose, your potential. Not someday, not when conditions are perfect, not when you feel ready. But now, in this moment, with this breath, with this choice, with this opportunity to align yourself with truth and become a force for healing in a world that desperately needs it. Thank you for taking this journey. Thank you for opening your heart and mind. Thank you for being willing to question everything you've been taught and seek deeper truth. And thank you for being here, now, in this critical moment in human history, when the choices we make will determine not just our own fate, but the fate of countless generations to come. You are exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do. And your presence, your consciousness, your commitment to truth and wisdom and love makes all the difference. If you want to continue this journey, if you want to explore more mysteries and discover more truths and remember more of what the ancients knew, then join us here every night. Subscribe to this channel. Become part of this community of seekers and rememberers and conscious choosers. Together, we are creating something new, something ancient and new simultaneously. We are remembering the future. We are becoming the bridge between what was and what could be. And every person who joins this journey strengthens the bridge, makes it more stable, makes it more likely that humanity will successfully cross from the old way of separation and exploitation to the new way of connection and sustainability. Sweet dreams, dear traveler. May your sleep be deep and restful. May your dreams be filled with wisdom and beauty. May you wake refreshed and renewed and ready to embody everything you've learned. And may you always remember that you are loved, you are supported, you are part of something infinitely larger than yourself. You are the universe experiencing itself. You are consciousness evolving. You are the answer to prayers spoken by ancestors long forgotten. You are the hope of futures not yet born. You are magnificent and powerful and essential. Never forget that. Never doubt that. And never stop choosing in favor of life, of love, of truth, of connection. Because that is how we heal the world. That is how we break the cycle. That is how we finally, after so many attempts across so many millennia, get it right. Good night. Sleep well. Dream deep. And remember, when you wake to a world full of possibility. A world that you are helping to create with every choice you make. A world that needs your consciousness, your wisdom, your courage, your commitment to living in alignment with truth. The future is not written. It's being written now. By you, by me, by everyone who chooses to wake up and show up and do the work of transformation. And together, we are unstoppable. Together we are powerful beyond measure. Together we can create the world that the ancients dreamed of. The world where humanity finally learns to live in harmony with nature, with each other, with the cosmos itself. That world is possible. It's waiting to be born. And you, beautiful soul, you are the midwife helping to bring it into being. Thank you. Bless you. And good night.